Chapter 328. Threat 1. As the darkness receded to make way for the light, Jianchen looked up only to see a large shrine. This shrine was large enough to house 10,000 people. But at this moment, this place was already filled with many scraggly-looking men that had all just been brought here along with Jianchen. What type of energy is this for it to be strong enough to transport every single person in that world? Could it be a saint ruler? Or maybe a saint king? Or perhaps a saint emperor? Jianchen thought to himself in amazement. The energy that had enveloped him was far too strong for him to even think about defending himself against. For those with tokens, please come here to register your name. For those without any tokens, please exit this place immediately. The door is behind you. At that moment, a loud voice echoed throughout the shrine as an elderly-looking man sat by a long table, as if he had been waiting there for some time. By his side were two assistants who looked to be around the same age as well. With those words in mind, many people grew depressed before walking toward the door. After everyone had left, only 200 men remained. Jianchen ended up as the most attention-grabbing person because his clothes were still intact. Everyone else was in terrible shape, and their clothes were not covering up most of their body. Many didn't even have a single space belt, and used a bag to hold their things. From this group, the majority of them were all great saint masters, while only a few dozen earth saint masters remained. Jianchen looked around himself. From the 200 people here, he recognized no one. Not even Ming Dong or Qin Shao could be seen. It seems that we were all taken outside. Jianchen thought to himself. The 200 men continued to walk toward the elder, and the very first person had begun to take out his tokens from his space belt to show to the elder. The elder swept his eye over the sum and spoke. 5 tokens, verification complete. Immediately an elder took out a brush and wrote the number 5 on a piece of paper before barking out. Speak your name. Liang Dezhong. The competitor spoke respectfully. You may go. The elder wrote down Liang Dezhong's name. The third elder took away the black tokens. The 3 elders worked in a fluid tandem. One would verify that the tokens were real while the second took their names and numbers, and the third collected the tokens. The second competitor came to the table and dropped 3 tokens on the table. 3 tokens, verification complete. The first elder spoke. Immediately the other elder began to write down the record, as the first one spoke a confirmation. After taking his name, the second elder wrote the number 3. Taking down the information was not slow at all, and the competitors with a small amount of tokens were quickly weeded out. Rapidly, tens of dozens of men had been fully recorded. So far, the person with the least amount of tokens was 2 while the most had 80. Not a single person had over 100 tokens, so Jianchen began to feel some confusion. Just how did these competitors survive the competition? Did no one try to rob them? In the later half of the competition, most of the tokens were all within the hands of a few strong experts. Most of the strongest competitors had already 1,000 tokens. Jetta Wukong and Shi Xiangran both had 1,000 tokens each. Could they have just never bothered to fight at all during the year? Jianchen thought. 126 tokens, verification complete. After a good amount of men, there was finally a person with over 100 tokens. Quickly, after one person had been announced to have over 100 tokens, another person with 300 tokens was announced, making him the highest. When it came to be Jianchen's turn, every single person immediately turned to look at him with a focused eye. Everyone was curious to see just how much the completely uninjured and intact competitor had collected. Jianchen lifted his left hand to reveal the space ring on his finger to everyone. That's a space ring. Someone cried out in shock. A space ring was the symbol of wealth, and meant anyone that wore one was not an ordinary person. For a mercenary to wear a space ring, it meant that this person was an extraordinarily strong individual. Because of how expensive space rings were, only Earth Saint Masters wore them. The 3 elders didn't have a change in their facial expression as they stared at Jianchen. Crash! The sounds of a wave of metallic objects crashing into each other could be heard as the black tokens crashed against the table. In a single second, the entire table had a small mountain on it that was almost impossible to begin to count from. The three appraisers grew startled at this at last, and stared at Jian-Chun with a shocked expression. After taking out all of the tokens from the space ring, Jian-Chun slowly brought down his left hand. "Is that all?" An elder asked Jian-Chun. Jian-Chun nodded his head and replied calmly, "That's all." The group of people standing nearby Jian-Chun were all like stone statues from the sheer amount of tokens on the table. This time, the elder in charge of counting the tokens took some time to count them all before speaking. 1873 tokens, verification complete. Hearing that number, everyone sucked in a sharp breath, as their hearts immediately skipped a beat. For those who had only collected several, or even less than 100 tokens, this amount was far too gigantic for them to take in. Who would have known that someone that barely looked past the age of 20 would have such an amount? The three elders' attitude toward Jian-Chun immediately changed, as the one in charge of writing down the name immediately smiled at Jian-Chun. "Fellow brother, what is your name?" "Jian-Chun." "Good brother Jian-Chun, your achievements have really astounded us. I hope you can continue to astound us, and have many more achievements in the next round." The elder smiled at Jian-Chun before writing down the number, 1873, on the paper with his name. Afterward, Jian-Chun left the area without another look back while the mercenaries all stared at him, as he left in mute shock. "Jian-Chun, that youth is named Jian-Chun." A person spoke out. "Jian-Chun, I've heard this name before. His name was recently made known. I've heard that he and the 5 experts are close friends, and that his own strength isn't weaker than theirs. So it's like that. It's no wonder he was able to collect so many tokens, if he is able to be compared against the 5 experts." After walking out of the hallway, Jian-Chun suddenly found himself in a giant place that was arranged like a courtyard. 4 giant hallways could be seen in every cardinal direction, and the hallway he just walked out from was one of the 4. Many other miserable-looking competitors could be seen hobbling out of the other hallways. In the middle of the courtyard-like arrangement was a single wide space, which was filled with people. Among the crowd was a single large space gate that shined brightly overhead. On the other side of the space gate was a stone statue that was familiar to everyone. "Jian-Chun, we're over here." A loud cry came out from far away as Ming Dong waved his hand at him. By his side, Huang Wan and Duge Feng could be seen standing there. Seeing his friends standing there, Jian-Chun had a pleasantly surprised smile on his face. He had originally thought that everyone was sent to different places, but they were still all here. Everyone quickly converged together with a happy smile on their faces. This mercenary city is quite strong for it to be able to have such an expansive area. Ming Dong said. Jian-Chun's heart skipped a beat. Could we be in some sort of empty space then right now? Ming Dong nodded his head. Correct, right now, we are in an isolated space. It seems that this space gate will allow us to return to the Tianyuan continent. Jian-Chun wasn't too surprised. He could already guess that they were no longer within Mercenary City. What he didn't expect was to hear that they were currently in an isolated space. We should head on out. The Grand Elder is most likely waiting for us. Qin Xiao spoke. After talking, the group walked toward the space gate, and when they walked out from the other side, they were standing back in the vast area in Mercenary City. Not too far was the giant stone statue that remained vivid and lifelike, almost as if it were a human filled with grace. His head continued to stare off into the sky, almost as if trying to stare a hole into it. Although I wasn't born in Mo Tianyuan's time, I've heard of his legends many times. In his year, the creator of Mercenary City was matchless. No one under the heavens could fight him, and he was even able to drive back the strongest of the Bai. The continent was left safe, but what a shame that he couldn't withstand the corrosion of time. Duge Feng spoke as he looked at the statue. Huang Wan looked at Mo Tianyuan's statue for a moment, as well before turning to speak to Jian-Chun. I'll be leaving first. I hope that I'll see you again in the finals. Take care of yourself. Be careful of Shi Xiangran's clan. They've come prepared. Your Uncle Tian and Uncle Yin will have quite the headache. Jian-Chun spoke seriously. No worries, they won't dare make a move in Mercenary City. Huang Wan spoke before turning her head and walking away. Jian-Chun turned to look at Senior and Yin Zheng before cupping his hands together. Fellow friends, we will be leaving as well. Until next time. One moment Jian-Chun, I think I heard Ming Dong say that you've established a mercenary group. Is that true? Senior asked as he looked at Jian Chun with a curious expression. Hearing this, Jian Chun's heart skipped a beat as he said, "That's correct. I've made a mercenary group. Did Senior want to join?" Senior laughed out loud before scratching at his bald head. "That's right. I'd like to join you if that is possible. Your strength is quite strong, and you are a genius as well. I can bet that my future will shine brightly with you." "Of course then, I would naturally accept you." Jian Chun had a happy smile on his face as he replied quickly before looking at Yunzheng. "Did brother Yunzheng wish to join as well?" With a small smile, Yunzheng replied, "If brother Jian Chun asks, then Yunzheng won't dawdle. Senior is correct. I too believe that traveling with you would lead to a bright future." The addition of these two was what Jian Chun was hoping for. Right now the flame mercenaries required experts, so the addition of 2 Earth Saint Masters was what Jian Chun needed most. Haha, then all is fine now. Our flame mercenaries have expanded once more. I believe that our flame mercenaries will shine throughout the continent now. Ming Dong laughed. Afterward, everyone left to find an inn. Qin Xiao had already made agreements with the Grand Elder from the Tianqin clan, who was waiting for them at an inn. Dugu Feng wasn't with Jian Chen's group since the Dugu clan had elders waiting for him. He had to go back for now. Jian Chen and Ming Dong brought Qin Xiao, Senior and Yin Zheng to the inn where the Grand Elder was waiting for them at a table with several dishes nearby. The Grand Elder looked at everyone before sweeping his eyes over to Qin Xiao and Qin Ju, who were both healthy with an excited smile. "Come and sit down. I've already ordered some delicacies. Just wait in the safety of my company." Ever since Jian Chen had first seen the Grand Elder, this was the very first time he had seen him smile or say a word. Even Qin Xiao was no exception. In that moment, Qin Xiao and Qin Ju both felt uncomfortable. Our apologies for worrying the Grand Elder. Qin Xiao cupped his hands in respect before sitting down at the table with everyone. Suddenly, the Grand Elder looked at Ming Dong with a sharp glance. In the next moment, a powerful look could be seen as he exclaimed in shock, "Sixth Cycle Earth Saint Master." Chapter 329. Threat 2. Seeing the shocked expression on the Grand Elder's face, Ming Dong laughed giddily. "The Grand Elder is quite keen to be able to see through my strength, but the Grand Elder needn't lose his manners." Before the competition had started, the Heaven Saint Master, that was the Grand Elder, had been able to place a large amount of pressure on Ming Dong. However now, Ming Dong could be at ease with the Grand Elder without feeling any of the pressure anymore. That was because he was merely a step away from becoming a Heaven Saint Master. If it were not for Uncle Tian, then he would have long since made the breakthrough to become a Heaven Saint Master. The Grand Elder continued to stare at the black-robed Ming Dong with his normally peaceful expression. Instead of being clear like water, emotions raged through his eyes. Disbelief could be seen within his pupils. Within the short time span of a year, Ming Dong had made the breakthrough to become a peak Earth Saint Master, from a Great Saint Master. This rate of progression was practically impossible, and the most important fact was Ming Dong's age. From his appearance, Ming Dong wasn't much different from Qin Xiao in age. Ming Dong was 30 years old at the very most. For a youth like him to be a mere step away from the Heaven Saint Master realm, this couldn't be called talented anymore. This was the signs of a genius seen once every millennia. A genius that would make anyone else frightened. How is this possible? A year ago you were only a Great Saint Master. Just how were you able to become a 6th Cycle Earth Saint Master in less than a year? Did you hide your strength before? The Grand Elder found it hard to keep his emotions in check, as even his voice began to quaver in shock. Seeing the look of shock on the Grand Elder's face, Ming Dong was delighted. In the past he had been a mercenary of the lowest rung on the ladder, a nobody. He had once looked at the Heaven Saint Masters as a high and mighty position that would never be attained by him. What he didn't know was that he would somehow have a major life change after following Jian Chen to Mercenary City. In such a short amount of time, he had already made major strides in power and became an entity that even a Heaven Saint Master would be surprised at. Haha, Grand Elder, don't be so surprised. This year I came across a fortunate encounter, and was able to make a major improvement in my strength. Ming Dong laughed. The Grand Elder quickly regained his calm, but the tiniest of shock could still be seen in his eyes as he looked at Ming Dong. This was still something he found hard to believe. For someone who wasn't even 30 years old, yet to reach the 6th cycle Earth Saint Master realm, if this were to be leaked out, the entire Tianyuan continent would be shocked. This was truly too unimaginable. For one to have a gift like this, if it took them 10 if not 5 years to make the breakthrough to become a Heaven Saint Master, they would still be one of the strongest in the continent since saint rulers were almost all hermits. I've grown old. To think that it was when I was 70 years old, when I made the breakthrough to become a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master. I didn't think that a 30-year-old would attain such a mastery already. If you continue on like this, then there'll be a day that you will become a supreme saint ruler. The elder spoke. Hearing this compliment coming from a Heaven Saint Master, Ming Dong had a pleased look on his face, as if he was the carp that had successfully made it past the dragon's gate. The Grand Elder looked at Qin Xiao. Xiao heir, you are Tianqing clan's shining star of the century. The mission you've accomplished for your father, even I feel gratified by it. Unlike Ming Dong, Qin Xiao didn't have his natural attitude toward the Grand Elder, and could only speak out. Grand Elder, when I return home, I shall prepare to make the breakthrough to become an Earth Saint Master. I am certain I will succeed. The Grand Elder laughed. Let us take this matter slowly. You are still quite young. First prepare yourself, and wait until you are completely sure that you will be able to become an Earth Saint Master. After all, becoming an Earth Saint Master holds the very first threshold of death. There cannot be a margin of mistake, or else your life is forfeit. Why haven't I seen Tianzhou? Where is he? The Grand Elder asked suddenly. Jianchen and Qin Xiao both looked dazed for a moment before going silent. Although Jianchen and Tianzhou had some disagreements, he didn't kill Tianzhou. That didn't mean someone else might have. Even Qin Zhu began to stuff his mouth with food, as if he hadn't heard the Grand Elder's words. Tianzhou had quite the talent. I hope he is still alive. The Grand Elder spoke as if he knew something, and said no more about it to the group. After the meal, Jianchen returned to his room. Since Tianzhou and his 3 men had not yet returned, the remaining few rooms were given to Yunzheng and Signorin. In his own room, Jianchen called Ming Dong over, and the two began to pore over the heaven's stolen fortune. Although this competition had finished, there was still the individual matches. After Jianchen had killed both Jie Wukong and Shi Xiangran, the 2 groups behind them would surely not let him go. Thus, Jianchen would need to try and increase his own power, which meant learning this heaven-tier battle skill. Within the heaven set of rooms of an inn in Mercenary City, Jie Wukong's body could be seen lying on the floor. 2 white-haired elders stood next to it with furious faces. On one side were the 2 middle-aged men that stood trembling by the side after carrying Jie Wukong. Who killed Jie Wukong? One of the elders spoke with a dangerous look. Elder, Lord Wu Wukong was killed by a youth named Ji Jianchen. One of the men quavered. Then what of the Duanyin sword? The other elder asked with a dreadful look. The 2 men both went pale in the face as they spoke no more. Speak, the elder who had asked about the sword commanded with a furious glare. It must have been taken by Jianchen. One man stuttered out. Slamming his fist onto the table, the elder broke the table into pieces before yelling. Worthless. Absolutely worthless. What use are you two? His fists came up in an attempt to strike at them. Immediately the other elder's face twitched before blocking him. Third elder, calm yourself. Don't forget where you are. We cannot make a move here. The third elder slowly lowered his hands with some reluctance before growling. You too. Go and find the whereabouts of Jianchen immediately. We must find him, and take back our ruler armament. Yes, third elder. We will go right away. The 2 men bowed before running out the door. At the same time another inn, 3 elders and a middle-aged man were waiting impatiently. The time has long since passed. Why hasn't the young lord returned yet? Did something happen to him? The middle-aged man said as he paced around the room impatiently. The 3 other gray-robed elders didn't say a word, but worried looks adorned their faces. One of them finally spoke up. Let's wait a little longer. The fourth elder went to find the young lord. I am sure he'll return soon. Elder Kai, do you think Lord Shixiangran has come across some trouble? Otherwise, why is it taking so long? The man blurted out. Even the three elders grew apprehensive at his words, but one managed to say, Don't be nervous, just wait and see. Time quickly passed by as 3 days and 3 nights flew by before a letter simultaneously made its way into Jian Chun, Ming Dong, and Senior An's hands. The three had made it to the next round, and the notice had already been posted in the city itself. The names of 500 people were written down with the number of tokens they collected. The very first thing that Senior An and Yun Zheng did that day was to buy a copy of the rankings for Jianshen. When Jianshen looked at the rankings, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Even with 1873 tokens, he was only in 14th place. The first place person was someone named Karaga. The amount of tokens he had collected had been 3,712 tokens, which was nearly 2,000 tokens more than Jianshen. The second place person was a person czar, who had collected 2,700 tokens, another unfamiliar name. The third place winner was Kajafe with 2,500 tokens. The fourth place person had a strange name. He had only had the name Ju, and had 2,300 tokens. Fifth place was a familiar name. It was Qin Ji who had amassed 2,100 tokens. Sixth place was Dugu Feng with 2030 tokens. Seventh place was Tianmu Ling with 1965 tokens. Eighth place was Huang Luan with 1964 tokens. Ninth place was an unfamiliar person named Bali Tong with 1952 tokens. The 10th place person was a person named Zhuge Xiaoxian with 1931 tokens. The next three names were also unfamiliar. It was only until 14th place that Jian Chun had seen his name. Under him were Ming Dong and Senior, and with 1,500 tokens each. The following men, after them, all had a small amount of tokens. The very last place person had around 300 tokens. This ranking list caused Jianshen to be silent for a long while. While he knew that this survival competition would have more than just the 5 experts, he didn't think that so many hidden experts would exist. For him to suddenly see an expert like the one who collected almost 3,000 tokens in this competition, it had truly shocked him. I wonder how strong they are, Jianshen muttered. Although he was 14th place on the rankings, it was not an accurate testament of his strength. Jianshen, who is this Karaga? I've never heard of his name, but he was able to collect so many tokens. He must be extremely strong then. Senior An spoke with narrowed eyes. Jianshen shook his head. I don't know either. It seems that we were too narrow-minded. With the continent so large, and filled with so many experts, the amount of experts in the gathering of the mercenaries should be large as well. And yes, that's right. In 3 days the finals will start. By then, we'll be able to see just how strong they are. This one is sure that the 3 men with Radiant Saint Force are among the top 10. Senior An spoke cautiously. After talking for some time, Senior An left the area, which allowed Jianshen to continue to research the Heaven's stolen fortune. The Heaven tier battle skill was unmistakably deep, and even with Jianshen's strength, he had barely got past the introduction. He had only a small grasp of the fundamentals, but he was still able to manage to barely increase his strength by 3 times. Though it was still extremely hard to control, he absolutely needed to master this battle skill as quick as possible, so he could use it. The Heaven Stolen Fortune had a total of 8 layers. The first layer was nothing more than an introduction, and after the first layer, the person would be able to multiply their strength by 3 times. The second layer would allow them to multiply it by 4, and the third layer would allow them to multiply it by 5. By the 8th layer, it would be possible to increase one's strength 10 times. While the Heaven Stolen Fortune was quite terrifying, the amount of energy used was immense. Increasing one's strength would use an equivalent amount of energy. While a person's strength could suddenly skyrocket, the amount of energy lost would skyrocket as well. Jian Chun meticulously studied the Heaven tier battle skill along with Ming Dong. Only Qin Xiao would occasionally play around with them, but not once had they seen the Grand Elder afterward. Today, 2 white-robed elders along with 2 middle-aged men with dark expression walked into the inn where Jian Chun was. Arriving at the third floor where Jian Chen's room was, one of them placed his leg on the door before ruthlessly kicking it open. Sitting on his bed with the Heaven-tier battle skill out, Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes before staring at the dangerous looks on the two elders' faces. He had long since felt them come in. The two elders looked at Jian Chen dangerously as one person asked, "Are you Jian Chen?" Jian Chen didn't have any fear as he responded, "Correct, I am Jian Chen. What may I call the two elders?" "We are from the Jetta clan. You may call us the third and fourth elders." One of the elders spoke. Chapter 330, Threat 3. We are from the Jetta clan. You may call us the third and fourth elders. One of the elders spoke. Still sitting on his bed, Jian Chen cupped his hands in greeting. "Fellow elders, what business might you have with me?" The third elder glared at Jian Chen dangerously. "Jian Chen, let me ask you, did you kill the young Lord Jetta Wukong?" "And so what if I did?" Jian Chen spoke. He didn't bother to deny it since many men had seen him kill Jetta Wukong. Even if he denied it, then the Jetta clan would be able to find out the truth from Qin Ji or Tianmu Ling straight away. The two elders exploded with killing intent as they listened to Jian Chen's words. How arrogant to kill the young Lord Wukong. "Jian Chen, just which clan are you from?" Jian Chen revealed a small smile. "I am by myself. Is there a problem?" The third and fourth elders both looked at each other for a moment before breathing a sigh of relief. Previously, they had been worried that Jian Chen would have an incredibly strong power supporting him. But now all of their fears had been cleared away. Although the two of them clearly knew that there was the risk that Jian Chen was deceiving them, his answer was what the two elders were hoping for. "Jian Chen, is the Duanyin sword in your hands or not?" The fourth elder gave a heavy stare toward Jian Chen. "Duanyin sword? Could that be the ruler armament in Jetta Wukong's hands? I didn't think that such a small sword would be given such a name. Not bad." Jian Chen laughed. Although the two men in front of him were Heaven Saint Masters, Jian Chen was not afraid. "So the Duanyin sword is still in your hands. If you hand over the Duanyin sword, then I'll make sure to leave your body in one piece." The third elder released a strong amount of killing intent. Jian Chen touched the space ring on his hand with a smile. "Either way I will be dead. You might as well first kill me and take my space ring. This space ring has what you want. Try to do as you please." "You arrogant child, do you really think I dare not kill you?" The third elder's face grew fierce as the entire room filled with a murderous aura. "If you dare, then come and kill me." Jian Chen laughed coldly. He was gambling on the fact that the two elders wouldn't dare make a scene in Mercenary City. He had remembered the words from the Grand Elder. "No matter what happens, do not try to fight in Mercenary City or risk having no help at all." "You!" The third elder bellowed in anger. He was on the verge of lashing out. But in the end he finally restrained himself. At this sight, Jian Chen had a small smile on his face. His guess was correct. Even the Jetta clan wouldn't dare to strike in Mercenary City. It seems that this Mercenary City has people even Heaven Saint Masters are afraid of. Jian Chen thought. Hearing the commotion within Jian Chen's room, Ming Dong walked into the room and looked at Jian Chen. "I heard some loud bangs in here. Who are they?" "They're from the Jetta clan," Jian Chen calmly replied. Ming Dong instantly realized what was happening. He knew that Jian Chen had killed Jetta Wukong and had taken his ruler armament. The moment he heard that they were from the Jetta clan, no other explanation was needed. "Jian Chen, do you require help? I can call Uncle Tian out to help." Ming Dong spoke under his breath to him. Shaking his head, Jian Chen said, "No need, this is Mercenary City. They wouldn't dare attack me here. Otherwise, they would have tried earlier without trying to intimidate me." Ming Dong had a blank look on his face at that. "I had almost forgot that violence is forbidden here." Turning to look at the two Jetta clan elders, he spoke with honesty. "Fellow seniors, you should go. Staying here would do nothing more but waste your time." The two elders had nearly died from anger from his response, as their eyes burned furiously. They had no way to vent their anger, since they didn't dare do anything in the city. "You too, I killed Jetta Wukong and have his ruler armament. What you wish to know you now know, you may leave." Jian Chen spoke as if he was the emperor giving an order. This grievance the Jetta clan had with him would not be resolved easily. To disregard the two like this, The two elders from the Jetta clan grew ashen in the face. If they were not in Mercenary City, then they would have long since struck out at Jianchen. There was no need for them to have such anger. Jianchen, you'll regret this. The fourth elder gnashed his teeth together. Jianchen, return the Duanyan sword, or else the Jetta clan will hunt you down no matter where you go. The third elder promised darkly. With a sneer, he pointed to the exit. You too, you may go. Right now, Jianchen didn't bother with any other words. The faces on the two elders grew terrifying as the third elder opened his mouth once more. Jianchen, do you truly wish to offend our Jetta clan? Jianchen said nothing. The fourth elder spoke. Jianchen, I will give you one last chance. Return the Duanyan sword, and we will no longer bother you. Even if you leave Mercenary City, we will not chase you. The fourth elder figured out that force would not get the right answer from him. So if a tough approach did not work, a softer approach would be needed. You two may leave. Jianchen was growing impatient by now. Jetta Wukong's clan was not a low one. And with him killing Jetta Wukong, the bridge had been burned. Only an idiot would relinquish the ruler armament and give more power to his enemy. You are certain that you will not return the Duanyan sword? The third elder clenched his fists tightly as an unbearable anger began to course through his heart. By this point, Jianchen had simply closed his eyes and no longer looked at the two elders. The manners of the elders were quite lacking. The master of the house had already told them to leave, yet they still remained. Seeing that Jianchen was being obstinate, the fourth elder let out a breath of air before trying to calm himself down. Right now, he knew that trying to get the ruler armament from Jianchen was impossible. We'll be leaving then. The fourth elder growled before stomping out of the room. The third elder glared poisonously before sneering once as he left the room as well. With a wave of his hands, he blew a gust of wind and closed the door. Sitting right beside Jianchen, he spoke out seriously. Jianchen, what are you planning now? Those two elders are Heaven Saint Masters, not easy opponents to deal with by any means. As if he had no care in the world, Jianchen laughed. No worries, while in Mercenary City they wouldn't dare make a move. Next up is the finals to the competition, so we'll be in the city for quite some time. Even when we leave, I have a way to evade their eyes and ears. Ming Dong took out a book from his space ring and handed it to Jianchen. Jianchen, this is a specialized heaven-tier battle skill that was entrusted to me from Uncle Tian to give to you. I was originally planning on giving it to you earlier, but seeing how painstakingly hard you were researching the heaven-stolen fortune, I was afraid it would impact your studies. However, in this situation, it seems that I should give this to you so you can learn it as soon as possible. If you come across a Heaven Saint Master who is after your life, this will help you immensely. Hearing the words Heaven-tier battle skill, Jianchen's heart skipped a beat once more. A Heaven-tier battle skill was something that he absolutely wanted. He didn't think that he would come across 3 separate Heaven-tier battle skills so quickly. Unable to contain his emotions, Jianchen took the Heaven-tier battle skill. This book was called Illusionary Flash. It was a battle skill specialized for movement and not attacks. Chapter 331. The 10 Best Practitioners Taking the Illusionary Flash Book. Jianchen's heart couldn't help but tremble with emotions. This battle skill was a speed-based one. It was quite different from the profound steps written in the Azulite Sword Law. That one was focused more on walking and for use in combat. And while it was able to increase his speed against a wind-attributed expert, he would surely lose. This illusionary flash increased the speed of a person's run in a linear direction. While it lacked the flexibility of the profound steps in the Azulite Sword Laws, it could beat a wind-attributed cultivator in linear movement, which was what Jianchen wanted. Furthermore, if the illusionary flash were to reach the pinnacle of mastery, then its speed would be unrivaled, and he could travel up to 500 kilometers in an instant. Although it sounded like an exaggeration, this was an aspect of the illusionary flash that could only be described as terrifying. Jianchen, you shouldn't underestimate the illusionary flash battle skill. My uncle Tian said that although it may be an assisting heaven-tier battle skill, its effects could be used against even a saint ruler. It was also one of the things he and my ancestor had found in the death nest a long time ago. This illusionary flash was an especially rare ancient record that belonged to an ancient clan. Its only weak point is that it is extremely hard to learn. Even I am stuck at a rough spot, but my speed has already increased 2 to 3 times over. Ming Dong explained to him. Upon his explanation, Jianchen immediately thought back to when he had came across Ming Dong. At that time, Ming Dong's speed was inconceivable, and he flew across several kilometers at a terrifying speed. Jianchen, this illusionary flash book is only just a copy. Once you memorize it, make sure you burn it so that it doesn't fall into anyone else's hands. Ming Dong. Jianchen clutched the heaven tier battle skill and nodded his head seriously. I understand. Jianchen, continue to research. I won't bother you anymore. However, I suggest that you learn the illusionary flash as soon as possible. Against a heaven saint master, you'll gain the power to flee if need be. With that, Ming Dong left the room. Jianchen immediately halted his research on the heaven's stolen fortune battle skill and began to read the illusionary flash. Since it was only a supplementary battle skill, its contents weren't too descriptive, and it only had 13 pages. Jianchen quickly memorized all 13 pages with his cognitive memory skills, and after that he burned the pages, so that not a single word remained. Jianchen continued to sit on his bed while deep in thought. Right now he had come across the profound material that was the illusionary flash. It was extremely challenging to practice despite it being a supplementary battle skill, and was harder than even the heaven's stolen fortune. Its innermost contents were both mysterious and profound. Some of the contents even dabbled with matters regarding space itself, causing Jianchen to be confused beyond belief. For the next 3 days, Jianchen remained in his room as he tried to comprehend the illusionary flash. Sometimes he would be sitting on his bed, other times he would be pacing in his room in an effort to understand it. Quickly, the finals to the gathering of the mercenaries approached. After 3 straight days of trying to reach an enlightenment, Jianchen finally had a small grasp of the skill. This didn't mean to say that he had reached a mastery of the very basics, but it was still a minor achievement for Jianchen. At the very least, he had a small unripened version of the illusionary flash, which allowed him to move at a faster speed at the cost of a small amount of saint force. By the following morning, Jianchen finally paused his efforts to understand the illusionary flash and left his room. Soon after, he, Qin Xiao, and several others left the inn together. In the next few days, the finals would be taking place. 500 mercenaries would be fighting one-on-one until a king of mercenaries is announced. The fighting grounds for the finals would take place on a giant plaza in the middle of Mercenary City. The arena was already set up as several highly raised platforms with a transparent barrier covering each arena. In every direction a multitude of people had already gathered to spectate today's events. Qin Xiao slapped Jianchen and Ming Dong's shoulders with a firm hand as he encouraged them. Jianchen, Ming Dong, fight on. Although he only spoke these 6 words, they were all that the 2 others needed to hear. With a smile, Jianchen replied, Don't worry, I will fight to my final breath. While I can't guarantee being number 1, I am sure I can reach into the top 10 without a problem. Afterward, Jianchen, Ming Dong and Senior split up from Qin Xiao and the rest of the group before identifying themselves as competitors. They crossed a space gate into a barrier-protected region, which was an isolated area that protected the competitors from the spectators, while still allowing them to see the outside world. Even the arenas themselves were protected with a frail-looking, but incredibly strong barrier that sealed up the insides completely. Only a person that had entered through a space gate would be able to gain access. That way, no one from the audience would be able to interfere, and the fights on the inside would not be able to affect the outside world. The matches in the finals would be settled by ballot. The first ticket holder would fight against the 499th ticket holder, while the second ticket holder would fight against the 498th ticket holder. So on and so forth, with the 10th ticket holder fighting against the 490th ticket holder. With such a method in place, if there was someone without a match, they would wait until the current round was over before participating in the ballot again for the next round. Jianchen picked the 88th number, meaning he would fight against number 412, and would be the 88th match. With 10 arenas conducting the matches simultaneously, the pace went by quickly. In no time at all, it was Jian Chen's turn to walk to the 8th arena. Walking through the space gate to cross into the 8th arena, Jian Chen arrived within the arena, encased by the barrier. This barrier was not only incredibly durable, but it had another unique characteristic, which was the inhabitants inside would not be able to hear the outside world. At the very most, they would be able to see the open mouths of the audience as they screamed, but no sound could be heard. Even the materials made to build the arena were unknown, as each step felt as if it was made from an incredibly strong iron. Just as Jian Chen entered the arena, his opponent crossed into it as well through the other side. A burly-looking man with the waist of a bear and the back of a tiger appeared. Compared to Jian Chen's slim build, the two were completely different. The man had a short inch of hair with fierce-looking eyes that made his expression seem intrepid. He had a two-handed sword that glowed red, signifying that he was a fire attribute Earth Saint Master. The two said no words and silently prepared to fight. Begin! An elderly voice penetrated the barrier and resounded in the eardrums of both fighters. The middle-aged man immediately sprung into action and flew toward Jian Chen. The two-handed sword in his hand blazed forward as it tried to stab Jian Chen's heart. Jian Chen stared calmly at the approaching man, as his mind couldn't help but plot a course for the illusionary flash. In that moment, the sword was already less than a meter away from Jian Chen's heart, but Jian Chen had not made a single movement yet. The middle-aged man saw that Jian Chen hadn't made an effort to dodge, and couldn't help but feel astonished. In a split second, the tip of the sword aimed at Jian Chen's heart immediately tilted to stab into his chest. Suddenly, right as the sword was about to pierce into Jian Chen's chest, Jian Chen's eyes flashed once as his sword appeared in his right hand and stabbed outward in an instant. At the same time as his strike, Jian Chen's figure disappeared, as a dissipating mirror image could be seen in his place. By the time he had reappeared, he was standing behind the man with his sword on his shoulder. "You've lost." Jian Chen didn't look back as he spoke those words. The man looked a little dazed for a moment before quickly recovering himself. He immediately brought a finger up to where his throat was only to find a small amount of blood on it. When he saw the blood on his finger, his face instantly grew shocked before sucking in a deep breath. What a fast sword! And what a fast speed! In that split second, Jian Chen's light-wind sword had already stabbed past the first few layers of skin on the man's throat without injuring him. The amount of strength he had put behind the blow was just perfect. If Jian Chen had been a little deeper with his strike, then the man would have been dead on the ground. Jian Chen is the winner of Arena 8. Came the judgment a second later as the two space gates opened up on either sides. "Younger brother, thank you for your leniency." After a few words of thanks, the middle-aged man walked off of the 8th arena with a look of dejection. Afterward, Ming Dong and Senior had advanced. With Min Dong's 6th cycle Earth Saint Master strength, he had easily defeated his opponent in an unsurprising way. Senior N's battle had been more intense, but in the end, he had achieved victory with some injuries. Many Radiant Saint Masters could be seen in Mercenary City, treating the various injuries of men for free, and in no time at all. After half the day had gone by, the first round had finally been over. In the end, 249 people had moved on, meaning a single person had to fight a randomly selected member from the other 249 men. By the second day, 124 people had passed with yet another single person left out, leaving him to fight it out for a spot with another one of the 124 men. Chapter 332. The 10 Best Practitioners, 2. By the fourth day of the competition, most of the 500 men had been quickly eliminated, so that only 31 men remained. Senior had been eliminated in the earlier round, leaving Jian Chen and Ming Dong. At the same time, De Gafeng, Tian Muling, and Huang Wan were all still in it. By this point, everyone within the top 31 were not weak at all. Their strength was plenty, their experiences ample, and each had a battle skill to complement them. The identities of the 3 Radiant Saint Force cultivators had long since been revealed, and they had been put on close watch by Jian Chen. Unfortunately, the opponents all three men fought weren't very strong, so the amount of strength they displayed had only been the tip of the iceberg. Aside from them, there was only one other competitor that had caught Jian Chen's eye, the one named Ju. Reaching the fourth-ranked spot, she was a high-ranking woman with a black robe and a dagger-like weapon. Not only that, but she was a wind attribute cultivator, meaning her speed was incredibly fast. From her appearance, she looked to be around 25 or 26 years old, but there was no definite proof of her age. Although her appearance was not yet beautiful enough to cause nations to fight over her, she could not be said to be ugly either. She was pretty in appearance, and her natural disposition was far beyond what Tian Muling could boast of, meaning not a single man could dare ignore it. Her eyes, however, had a bone-chilling stare that could freeze the spirits themselves, as a terrifying expression adorned her face constantly, as if to hide the killing aura emanating from her. Every single one of her opponents had not been able to survive and died by getting struck through the heart each time. Her speed with the dagger was comparable to only Jian Chen's sword speed. That night, Jian Chen spent time by himself in his room to study the illusionary flash. Tomorrow morning would establish the top 16, and by then, the top 10 would be established. Experts within the Tianyuan continent were like clouds. There was simply no shortage of outstanding civilians. Although Jian Chen had only heard of the 5 experts during his time collecting the tokens, they were not the only experts in the competition. In their midst were people who were excellent at keeping a low profile, and it was only when the finals started that their identities were revealed. Otherwise, all of the men that had came across them were killed off, so that their strength would not be revealed. Right now, Jian Chen felt that he was quite narrow-minded. Starting tomorrow, each and every match would have an unknown variable to it, since by this point in the gathering of the mercenaries, all of the weaker mercenaries had been weeded out. The remaining 31 people were the elite among the elite, and would be stronger than De Gufeng at the very least. At that moment, a knock on the door could be heard. Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes from his contemplative meditation. With a wave of his hand, a gust of wind unlatched the metal bolt on the door. "Come in." As the door opened, 4 expensively dressed elders walked in. Among them were 2 white-robed men with black hair and kindly expressions. The third man wore a black robe, and had hair that traveled down to his shoulders, and a scarred left eye. Only his right eye remained open, giving him a rather fierce-looking expression. Evidently he had been injured a long time ago. The last elder wore a simple red garb that covered his small build, but his skin was rather dark. Jian Chen measured up the 4 elders with a rather serious expression. None of the 4 men had bothered to hide their presence, and judging from that, Jian Chen was astonished to discover that all 4 of them were Heaven Saint Masters. As Jian Chen was measuring them up, the 4 of them were also sizing him up. Since the patriarch of the Tianqing clan had given him a way for him to hide his own strength, despite the 4 men being Heaven Saint Masters, they were unable to discern Jian Chen's strength. "For elders, what business might you have?" Jian Chen asked as he spoke to the 4 in a normal tone of voice. "Young brother, you are Jian Chen?" One of the elders spoke with a kindly voice. "This one is." Jian Chen replied, "Brother Jian Chen, we have heard that the 3rd lord of the Shi family, Shi Xiangran, was killed by you. Is that matter true?" The same elder spoke with a calm tone. Without a twitch in his face, Jian Chen spoke. "Who might these elders be?" With a laugh, the elder began to stroke at his long beard. "Others have called us 4 as the 4 brothers of the Kai family. Presently, we serve as the Shi family's handlers of the law." Then, the elder briefly stopped talking for a moment before saying once again, "Brother Jian Chen, we have already investigated the matter, but we bear no malice toward you. We merely hope that Brother Jian Chen will return the seal of Treasure Mountain. That cannot be permitted to fall into an outsider's hand. If it remains with you, it will only bring you trouble." Elder brother speaks correct. The one-eyed person spoke without a single hint of emotion. The seal of Treasure Mountain is an heirloom of the Shi family that came to be after a special refinement method. Only those of the Shi family will be able to wield its power. To you, the seal of Treasure Mountain will be an useless piece of iron that you cannot use. None of elders had tried to threaten Jianchen, and instead tried a simpler approach in hopes that Jianchen would hand the seal of Treasure Mountain over. Jianchen cupped his hands together in an apologetic manner. I give my apologies, but the seal of Treasure Mountain will not be given back. Young brother, you must understand, if you do not return the seal of Treasure Mountain, then the Sure family will not let you go. This item will only serve to destroy you. The elder spoke honestly and kindly, shaking his head. Jianchen didn't give a second thought. This shouldn't be something that elders should worry themselves with. Jianchen knew that even if he were to hand it over, the Sure family would not let him be. If young brother is determined on this path, then we have no choice, we shall leave. The elders spoke no more words and left the room quickly. After exiting the inn, the single-eyed man sighed. Big brother, what shall we do now? The one called Jianchen refuses to hand over the seal of Treasure Mountain. Our responsibility lies only with protecting the young lord, not the retrieval of the seal of Treasure Mountain. For now, let us report this to the Sure family, and let the leader deal with it. The leader spoke in a neutral voice. This time not only did the Sure family's plan fail, but the third lord has died as well, while also having the ruler armament snatched away. This is truly an example of giving away the bride, and then losing the army. The Sure family will definitely be shaken down to its core. The red-robed elder laughed. They were not truly affiliated with the Sure family. Forget it, we have no business with this matter. Let the Sure family deal with its headaches. We are nothing more than the business dealers for the Sure family, not a scapegoat for their troubles. Let us all remember, do not think that the person the Sure family has offended is someone that we have offended. This time, the gathering of the mercenaries has amassed a large amount of strong combatants. While they themselves are strong, the powers supporting them are not. Furthermore, some of these powers are people even the Sure family cannot afford to offend. Especially the one called Qin Ji. I have heard that he is the sole prince of the Qinhuang kingdom. It is possible that he is the next emperor to be of the kingdom. This type of person is someone we definitely should not offend. By the second day, Jianchen had entered the competition area earlier to draw his lot before entering the space gate to start the match. Not too long after he had entered, his opponent entered the arena as well. But the moment Jianchen saw his opponent, his eyes widened in shock. It was Dugafeng. Dugafeng returned the stare with a bitter laugh. I didn't think that I would be fighting against you. Even Jianchen felt helpless as he shrugged his shoulders. This is nothing more than a coincidence. Quickly, the announcement to start the fight could be heard, but neither Jianchen or Dugafeng made a move. Jianchen, I hope that you will achieve the number 1 spot. With that, Dugafeng admitted defeat. In this match, Jianchen had won without fighting. Exiting the arena, Jianchen stuck around in order to observe the other matches. After this round, only 16 would move on. In the end, 3 men were killed and 2 heavily injured. One of the casualties had been from Ju's dagger stabbing into a man's heart, drawing his final breath. This was something even the strong Radiant Saint Masters had found impossible to reverse. Both Jianchen and Ming Dong had managed to advance into the top 16. Qin Ji and Tian Muling had advanced as well with their ruler armament, causing major injuries to their opponents. Although Huang Luan had her Cylinder Bow, within the constrained arena, her Cylinder Bow was heavily handicapped. She herself only had the strength of a first cycle Earth Saint Master. So she lost since her opponent had been one of the Radiant Saint Force attributed men with impeccable strength. Because of an untimely match with fate, Dugafeng had been eliminated from the tournament, while the other 2 Radiant Saint Force attributed men advanced on. The 3 of them were true to their rumors and were extremely strong. One of them in particular was a 4th cycle Earth Saint Master, with a strong repertoire of battle skills. The following 10 combatants would be decided from the top 8 of the 16 combatants. From the loser's bracket, the top 2 would be given another chance. Because it was still daytime, the competition resumed. After choosing his lot, Jianchen stood on a stool and waited for the next round. The other 15 fighters stood by Jianchen in the isolated area away from the crowd. Hey Jianchen, you have to get number 1, okay? Don't let us all down. We all have high expectations for you. Ming Dong slapped Jian Chen on the shoulder and laughed. Hee hee, little brother, the experts here are as numerous as the clouds. Although you were able to win over me, the others will not be as weak. Do you think you will be able to claim number one among them all? Tian Muling spoke from in front of Jian Chen. Both of her eyes stared at him with her words sounding like an enchanting spell that could entice any man. Jian Chen stared back, and then moved his eyes to the outside of the arena. I can only say that I will try my best and try when the time comes. As soon as Jian Chen finished talking, a peculiar voice could be heard from behind. To try your best? Kid, you're only so old. Do you not know how vastly far you are from the number one spot? Do you take the rest of us as trash? Turning his head, Jian Chen could see a middle-aged man around the age of 45 or 46. He wore a white robe, and his appearance was quite familiar to Jian Chen, since he was one of the 3 Radiant Saint Force attributed cultivators. By the middle-aged man's side, another man not too far away in age stared at Jian Chen with contempt before speaking absent-mindedly. Forget it, Karaga. Don't bother with the words of a brat. He is nothing more than a braggart. At the words of these two, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed before his stare turned cold in temperature. Even Ming Dong grew angry as he spoke with a warning. You two should best hope that I don't come across you in the arena. The two men instantly grew furious as Karaga exploded. Such an ignorant brat. If this place were not Mercenary City, this one would have cut you into multiple pieces. Kid, you must be Ming Dong. Allow me to offer you a word of advice. If you ever come across me in the arena, surrender at once. Otherwise, I swear that you will not leave the arena alive. The middle-aged man, right next to Karaga, spoke with killing intent leaking from him. If it were not for the place they were in, then the two would have struck out earlier. Ming Dong sneered before leaking out his own killing intent. Then we'll see if you can stay true to your words. Jian Chen's face grew dark as he stared at the two men before speaking. Karaga Kajafe, I will remember your words. We will see who lives and who dies in the end. These two were the first and third ranked men, so their names had long since been memorized by Jian Chen. Two kids who don't know the immensity of the heavens. Kajafe laughed as he mocked both Jian Chen and Ming Dong. That's enough, you two truly don't know shame. You've grown this old, yet you are bullying the younger generation? I feel as if I must feel shame in your place. The remaining man in the middle finally spoke. Hearing that, the two men's stares were redirected toward the third person. Czar, this is something between the two of us. There is no need for you to butt in. Kajafe replied to him. Could it be that you two think that bullying the juniors is a glorious task? How silly. If word of this were to be announced, then disgrace would fall upon us Radiant warriors. Czar's words were like ice. Enough. Karaga stared at Czar with a look of embarrassment. Czar, don't forget your place. Just what side do you belong to if you side with an outsider? Czar sneered. Don't give such a preposterous argument. I am helping no outsider. I only cannot approve of you two. You two bring shame to us Radiant warriors. You, Karaga and Kajafe both growled as they trembled in anger, but no words escaped from their mouths. At that moment, the barrier suddenly changed color before disappearing rapidly. In the next second, all of the arenas in front of them suddenly began to descend before disappearing without a trace into the ground, forming a single flat clearing without any dents or bumps. Jian Chen was shocked by this sudden development. He hadn't thought that the Mercenary City would be capable of such a mysterious event. Jian Chen had no idea how the arenas descended into the ground, and then suddenly rise up again, as a single giant piece of land. This single piece of land was far bigger than the arenas, and was about 500 meters in width. As the single arena ascended up, another transparent barrier completely encompassed it before two space gates opened up on opposite sides of each other. Chapter 333. The 10 Great Practitioners 3. Will the competitors step inside the arena? An elderly voice called out from a mysterious location. Jian Chen looked at the number 3 in his hand. He was to be the third match. Today was the day the top 10 people would be decided. Thus, the way the competition would continue would be different. 10 matches would not happen at the same time. Instead, it would be one match at a time. After all, the people gathered here now were the geniuses of the continent. Not a single one of them was weak, and each one of them were spectacular in the ways of battle. Little brother, could you cheer me on? Tian Muling laughed into Jian Chen's ears before walking into the space gate. Afterward, another middle-aged man walked into the other space gate. The match continued straight away, as Tian Muling took out her long sword, which was blue in nature, meaning she was a water-attributed cultivator. She first fought against the man with her own strength, but several exchanges later, she decided to bring out her ruler armament. The strength of this middle-aged man was stronger than her own. Tian Muling's ruler armament held an advantage in speed, as the whip could extend and contract with ease. The whip's mirror image could be seen almost everywhere in the ring, as it drew closer to her opponent and suppressed him inside. The power of a ruler armament was something that scared the man, as he wasn't strong enough to take on a blow, and could only dodge it. Mercenary City had not forbade the use of ruler armaments. Although its use was equivalent to using outside help, the Tianyuan continent was not known for being fair. No matter what was used, as long as one won, then that was the way of the king. Thus, it could be said that using outside help was still a form of strength. The middle-aged man could only dodge miserably since Tian Muling's whip could cover a large area. With an explosive shout, a large amount of energy rippled out before giving him protection. Straight away, a giant sword 10 meters long appeared in his hand, before stabbing through the void in the whip's path with a loud clap of thunder. This must be an advanced Earth-tier battle skill. Judging from this, it must take a large amount of Saint Force to use. A few men muttered beside Jianchen. In the arena, Tian Muling's face grew serious as her whip moved in reaction. Striking at the 10-meter-long sword, the sword managed to take several blows from the whip, before finally shattering with a loud bang, as a wave of violent energy burst outward. A wave of water-attributed Saint Force flew out from Tian Muling's body, before enveloping her, as a form of defense against the energy. But she was still forced back. Just as Tian Muling moved back, her face suddenly grew pained as a large sword suddenly pierced through her chest from the back. The middle-aged man had somehow moved behind her during the explosion, and used his saint weapon to tear through her chest. "You've lost," the man spoke as he held his sword through her chest. With his sword run through her body, if Tian Muling didn't admit defeat, then the energy within his saint weapon would explode outward in an instant, which would cause an extreme amount of damage to her. Tian Muling, unable to withstand the pain anymore, nodded her head slowly in realization that she had lost. "Aridia is the winner," the announcer boomed as the middle-aged man slowly took out his sword before leaving the arena. Just as Tian Muling left the arena, 2 Radiant Saint Masters immediately came to her side and began to treat her wounds with Radiant Saint Force. That was because even the 8 losers would have to fight for a spot in the top 10. Thus, even though Tian Muling was eliminated, she still had a chance of hope. The second match was between Czar and Tian Qiqing. With his dominating strength, Czar easily defeated his opponent. The third round was Jian Chen's match. As he entered the arena, a black-robed girl entered it as well. Jian Chen's opponent was Zhu. Zhu held her dagger in her right hand with eyes as cold as ice as she stared at Jian Chen. Her entire demeanor seemed as icy as her glare. And even though she was still standing still, she gave off the impression that she was an extremely cold statue instead. Jian Chen looked quite calm. He had been observing her for some time now, so he knew that Zhu was a merciless opponent. With her icy stare, she would never let her opponent leave alive, and Jian Chen would be no different to her. "Begin!" the elderly voice cried out through the barrier. In an instant, Zhu disappeared into a black streak of light, as she shot toward Jian Chen with her dagger shining in the light as it stabbed at his heart. At the same time, a strange and chilly feeling could be felt from the dagger, causing Jian Chen to feel a cold shiver. Jian Chen secretly felt some surprise in his heart. This would be the first blow of many, but he hadn't thought her saint weapon would be able to launch such a cold presence. Despite his shock, however, Jian Chen's movements weren't lacking either, as he brought out his light wind sword in an instant to strike against the dagger. Ding! A metallic clang could be heard as Zhu's dagger was stopped by Jian Chen's sword. However, Jian Chen's sword began to gain a frosty coating while making Jianchen feel as if he was suddenly naked within a world of ice and snow. With a look of shock, Jianchen suddenly came to the realization that he had been underestimating Ju too much. The very moment their saint weapons had come in contact, his sword had been infected by ice crystals. Just what martial art method is this for it to have such an effect? Jianchen thought to himself. But then, Ju struck out a second and third time as her dagger was poised to claim Jianchen's heart. Jianchen's sword smashed against the dagger both times, but with each block, the light wind sword grew thicker with frost. The icy chill made Jianchen's arm grow rigid, as well almost as if it was freezing the bloodstreams within his arm. Her martial arts is quite strange. The longer we fight, the worse I grow. I have to end this fight straight away. Jianchen thought immediately. With a wave of his arm, the light wind sword smashed against the ground, shattering the frost on it. Straight away, Jianchen's arm blurred as the entire area became shrouded with mirror images of his sword. Ju's eyes flashed dangerously as a cold white aura flowed out from her, making it seem as if the area around her was freezing into ice. The entire arena began to feel the effects as it instantly froze over. Even the barrier itself took on a layer of frost. Jianchen's stab was immediately blocked as several clangs could be heard. Almost like a fish in water, Ju was able to move forward and stab at Jianchen's heart once more with her dagger. Seeing the dagger fly at him, Jianchen subconsciously thought of the illusionary flash. With a single movement, he flew forward, leaving behind a perfect mirror image in his place, before he struck out with his light wind sword. Immediately turning around, Ju's dagger blocked Jianchen's sword. Then, without retreating, she drew closer to Jianchen's body and stabbed at his heart. At the same time, a sheet of frost climbed up Jianchen's legs, making him immobile. Realizing that his mobility had been cut off, Jianchen's face grew startled. Without a single moment of hesitation, his light wind sword flew into motion, as it flew out 3 different times. One was to block the dagger, the second and third were aimed at Ju's heart and throat, to try and force her back. With a grunt, Jianchen stamped down on the ground with Saint Force aiding his feet, allowing him to shatter the ice that bound his legs to the ground. With his mobility back, he instantly used the illusionary flash to move like lightning toward Ju's side with his light wind sword flying straight at her to suppress her. While Ju's attack was by no means slow, Jianchen was faster by a small margin. Just barely blocking Jianchen's strikes with some pain, the light wind sword took on a sheen of frost once more, slowing down his next stab. Just at the most crucial point, a sharp amount of sword chi flew out from the sword, reducing the frost on the blade into powder, before flying straight at Ju. Quickly flying backward, frosty cold air flew out from Ju's body, before surrounding the entire area around her. With a small smirk, Jianchen instantly activated the Heaven's Stolen Fortune, so that his strength and speed was multiplied 3 times over. His light wind sword exploded with sword chi, so that it shattered through the ice that had formed in the area before resting against Ju's throat. Seeing the strike at her throat, Ju stopped her attack and stared at Jianchen with an expressionless face, but her eyes still reflected a frosty aura, without any fluctuations of emotions. Jianchen is the winner. A loud voice called out as 2 space gates flew up on both sides of the arena. As his light wind sword disappeared, he began to walk out without speaking a single word. Ju turned to leave as well without another word. Jianchen, good job. Ming cried out in excitement as he walked over to greet him. As Ming Dong's hand landed upon Jianchen's shoulder, he immediately retracted his hand and cried out in shock. Good God, Jianchen. Did you just come out from an icy cavern? Why are you so cold? With a forced smile, Jianchen replied, pretty much. That arena was essentially colder than an icy cavern. I almost found myself frozen to the ground. That Ju is not an ordinary person. Her martial arts is quite magical and strange. To be able to control such a cold aura along with her fighting strength, even someone stronger than her would be easily caught in her trap. Hearing Jianchen's words, Ming Dong grew serious as he murmured, it seems we have to be careful of her in the future. Chapter 334. The 10 Great Practitioners 4. Ming Dong's match was right after Jianchen. So after the announcement, he and his opponent entered the space gate. Almost as if arranged by the heavens, Ming Dong's opponent had been one of the two people that had mocked them Ka Jiafei. Before he had left, Ming Dong had a small grin on his face. Jian Chen, I have to chop this guy in half. Slapping Ming Dong on his shoulders, Jian Chen gave him an encouraging look without saying anything. Ka Jiafei had a dark smile on his face as he spoke. How coincidental. My opponent is you? It seems that God no longer wishes for you to remain alive, and allowed me to take control. Kid, aren't you supposed to be mad? You'll be mad soon enough. Hearing those words, Ming Dong leaked some killing intent into his words as he spoke. Spare me your big words. Wait until we get into the arena. I'll make it so you can't even cry anymore. With those words, Ming Dong immediately walked through the space gate and into the arena. Even with death near at hand, you are so arrogant still. Ka Jiafei spoke in disdain as he walked into the arena. Begin. As soon as the two men entered, a loud voice called out to them again. Instantly, a large amount of killing intent flowed from Ka Jiafei as he stared at Ming Dong like a bloodthirsty magical beast. A radiant saint force attributed sword appeared in his hand, forming a 2-meter-long longsword. The longsword emitted a bright milky light that made it seem as if it were a divine sword. Go and die! Ka Jiafei roared as he flew toward Ming Dong, with his sword swinging fiercely toward him. With a small laugh, Ming Dong took out his cyan-colored sword before disappearing from view. In a flash, he flew toward Ka Jiafei, and almost as if his sword had blended in with the wind, it streaked across Ka Jiafei's waist with a cyan glow, leaving behind a fierce-looking wound. Ming Dong's speed was unbelievably fast to the point where even Ka Jiafei wouldn't be able to keep up. Feeling the wound on his waist, Ka Jiafei could only see his hand drenched in his own blood. With an ugly expression, Ka Jiafei tried to figure out just when he had been injured. He had insulted and threatened that Ming Dong wouldn't be leaving the arena alive, but he didn't think that in the very first exchange, he would be the one damaged. This was a shame that could not stand. Brat, you're dead! Ka Jiafei's glare grew dark before a milky white glow emerged from his wounds at the same time as he was talking, causing his wounds to heal quickly. Ming Dong sneered in disdain. I've heard that you cultivators with the Radiant Saint Force are not killable, and are called the Undying. Today we'll see just how undying you actually are. With that, Ming Dong flew toward Ka Jiafei, and disappeared within the next instance. What a fast speed! Heavens, for his speed to be that fast, could he be a wind-attributed Heaven Saint Master? Outside of the arena, many people cried out in amazement as they saw the speed that Ming Dong had just revealed. Even Ka Jiafei grew deathly serious as he watched Ming Dong flash away. As soon as he grew close, Ka Jiafei immediately shouted out loud as he brought his Radiant Saint weapon toward Ming Dong's chest. However, he had managed to only cut into an empty space where Ming Dong's mirror image had been. Crap! Ka Jiafei exclaimed at this bad development. Without a second's worth of a reaction, a sudden stinging pain could be felt from behind as a cyan-colored sword stabbed through his chest. Ka Jiafei shouted out in anger as he dashed forward, so that the sword would be taken out of his body. In the next moment, a large amount of Radiant Saint Force coursed through his body to treat the wound. While the wound on his chest wasn't fatal, it was still a heavy injury that would impact his fighting ability. Brat, you've truly angered me. I'll definitely smash your body into pieces. Ka Jiafei's eyes grew bloodshot as he glared at Ming Dong with a furious expression. You truly do think yourself as invincible. If I wanted to kill you, then I would have stabbed your heart earlier and killed you. Ming Dong laughed as if he was playing around with him. With a furious snarl, Ka Jiafei immediately burst with Radiant Saint Force before forming a silver-white armor that covered his entire body sans his eyes. Karaga and Zar looked at the armored Ka Jiafei with a look of surprise before Zar mocked him. What a nuisance, he reaps what he sows. Now that he took out his Radiant Saint armor, he has truly lost all face. Karaga stood by Zar's side with an ugly look on his face, but not a single word was spoken. The other competitors had been stunned by Ming Dong's speed. Although Ming Dong wasn't all that old, his strength wasn't weaker than anyone else here. His speed was especially fast, and made everyone think that he was actually a Heaven Saint Master. That was because his speed had already far outstripped the realm an Earth Saint Master could attain. And even a sixth cycle wind attributed Earth Saint Master wouldn't be able to reach such a speed. Seeing the protective armoring on Kajafei, Ming Dong was a bit dazed. This was the very first time he had seen such a thing. But he laughed anyways. Did you think wearing a tortoise shell would protect you? With that, Ming Dong disappeared once more before reappearing behind Kajafei and slashed onto Kajafei's chest. Bang! A loud sound was heard as Kajafei flew back, with a clear imprint on his chest armor. Ming Dong shook his slightly numb right hand as he muttered, "What a thick tortoise shell." Kajafei glared venomously at Ming Dong as he raised his sword above his head. "Brat, you've been aggressive enough. I'll send you on your way now. Absolute truth first cross." Radiant Saint Force surged out from Kajafei's body as he brought his sword up. At the same time, a powerful amount of pressure suddenly came crashing down on the entire arena, causing Ming Dong to find it hard to breathe. Although the pressure had not affected the barrier, the entire arena was affecting even the outside area, causing everyone on the outside to feel the mountain-like pressure as well. The pressure was so much that none of them felt as if they could move, and instantly went pale, as their blood escaped from their faces. This is a Heaven Tier battle skill. He's using a Heaven Tier battle skill. A white-haired elder cried out in shock, causing everyone else to pale at the overwhelming power. At the same time, everyone stared in excitement at Kajafei. Regarding Heaven Tier battle skills, they were a once-in-a-millennia opportunity to become rich. Not a single person wanted to miss this. Even the Heaven Saint Masters were all staring intensely at Kajafei. This was because Heaven Tier battle skills were extremely expensive, and some Heaven Saint Masters didn't even have a single Heaven Tier battle skill. Seeing Kajafei's battle skill, Ming Dong had a serious look at last. Don't think that you're the only one with a Heaven Tier battle skill. I'll show you the power of an advanced Heaven Tier battle skill. With that, an equally large amount of energy began to ripple out of Ming Dong, before collecting together in his sword. In the next moment, a stronger wave of pressure blew back, and returned the pressure given to him by Kajafei's battle skill. Its power had reached even the outside area where countless of great Saint Masters coughed out a mouthful of blood, as their faces grew even more pale. Suddenly, the entire crowd began to push backward, as the ones incapable of enduring the pressure tried to escape. All sorts of panicked cries could be heard. Heavens, this is a Heaven Tier battle skill. Two Heaven Tier battle skills are about to clash. Who's going to be the winner and who will be the loser? With two Heaven Tier battle skills about to clash, this will cause even the heavens to shake. Who knows whether or not the arena will be able to handle it? Everyone get back. For two Heaven Tier battle skills to go head-to-head. What result will happen? We'll find out soon enough. The power from the Heaven Tier battle skills of Ming Dong and Kajafei had caused a panic, as everyone from Great Saint Masters to Earth Saint Masters all flew into an outrage. Not a single of them had seen such a clash like this before. While the Heaven Tier battle skills continued to build up power, Ming Dong and Kajafei both continued to hold back. At their level, they needed to build up power for the full power. The wind began to grow turbulent as a strong gale was whipped up around the two competitors, while they initialized their Heaven Tier battle skills. The pressure was enough for Great Saint Masters to be forced back, and even some Earth Saint Masters were forced a few steps back. By this point, only a few of the Heaven Saint Master experts were within 20 meters of the arena without any pain. However, each one of them had a layer of Saint Force protecting them. While it took some time to explain, it had only taken a few moments. In the end, both battle skills were fully prepared. Absolute Truth first cross. Sword of the Tyrant, Heaven-Shaking Blade. Chapter 335. The 10 Great Practitioners 5. Two bangs could be heard as the two men's saint weapons flashed forward. Kajafei's silver sword seemed almost as if it was a divine sword that shot forward with seemingly two strikes that resembled a single cross that shined brilliantly in everyone's eyes, leaving behind a sunspot-like image. With an overwhelming amount of power, the cross flew toward Ming Dong. Ming Dong's sword slashed toward Ka Fei as well. As his sword was swung, the winds began to warp as the skies grew dark. Only a compressed amount of sword chi could be seen as it flew toward Ka Fei and smashed against the cross. With a loud explosion, a large ripple of energy immediately scattered the entire area. Ming Dong's slash impacted against the cross, shattering it into pieces before continuing on toward Ka Fei. In the end, it pierced into his body before striking at the barrier behind him. With an explosion, the barrier rippled slightly before the attack dissipated. The explosive energy caused by the blow was quickly absorbed by the barrier surrounding the arena. Even as the energy struck against the barrier, it was like a pebble being thrown into the ocean and disappeared without any other external effect. In a flash, the entire arena was clean of any of the energy. Ming Dong continued to feel the brunt of this terrifying backlash. Compared to before, he no longer had the same easygoing face as before, and was completely pale. The Saint Force that was used up by the Heaven Tier battle skill was truly immense, and after that one startling attack, his Saint Force was almost all used up. Ka Fei stood in front of him with sluggish eyes and a dazed expression. Kacha! Suddenly, the strange white piece of armor that covered Ka Fei's body began to fracture into a large crack appeared from his forehead to the point between his legs, and the bright red tint of blood could be seen coming out. The silver armor right now was an extremely eye-catching sight. In the next moment, a truly surprising thing happened as Ka Fei's body suddenly split in half before falling to the ground. His inner organs had long since been reduced to a minced mess as blood poured all over the place. After the two Heaven Tier battle skills had clashed, Ming Dong had came out unscratched while Ka Fei was split in two. This sight caused everyone there to be breathless. Even the various Heaven Saint Masters were left speechless. At this moment, there were millions of people watching the finals, but the entire place was silent. So silent was the area that the heartbeat of everyone could be heard bumping at an accelerated pace. When the two Heaven Tier battle skills clashed, everyone had imagined its aftereffects. Most people had anticipated both sides to come out heavily injured and end in a tie. They hadn't imagined that the impossible would happen, and that after the two initialized their battle skills, one person would die a wretched death by being split in two while the other would remain unharmed. A single elder dropped down from the middle of nowhere with his silk robes. Standing in the air, it seemed as if he was treating the Earth Saint Masters and Heaven Saint Masters as beneath him. Yet he was not rude at all. Not a single of the Heaven Saint Masters below him had any complaints and or any dissatisfaction toward this individual. Every single Heaven Saint Master had only respect for him, and even a small yearning. The elder stared at the arena below before muttering, a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master versus a 5th cycle Earth Saint Master. An advanced Heaven Tier battle skill versus a primary Heaven Tier battle skill. This type of outcome wasn't unexpected at all. While the elder didn't speak too loudly, his voice could still be heard loud and clear throughout the arena. Immediately, the entire crowd went into an uproar as they looked at Ming Dong with a mixture of envy, admiration, and jealousy. An advanced tier Heaven Tier battle skill. He had one of those? I've been a Heaven Saint Master for over 20 years, but my strongest battle skill is only an advanced Earth Tier battle skill, AI. He's already a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master at this age? Dear heavens, that's impossible. Did I hear that right? He's not even 30 years old. How could he be a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master? And a Heaven Tier battle skill, good God. That's just too shocking. This gathering of the mercenaries is far too much. In a short moment, all sorts of comments could be heard coming through all over the arena, as everyone congratulated, complained, or grumbled their thoughts about Ming Dong. The floating elder looked at Ming Dong with a smile envious look before speaking absent-mindedly to himself. Who would have known that the great elder would have bestowed the technique that made him well known to you? For a youth to have such control over the sword of the tyrant. It seems that the great elder did not waste any effort to train you. Ming Dong, just who are you for the great elder to spend so much time and energy? The winner of this match was clear to see to anyone with eyes. So even though Ming Dong hadn't heard the cry of victory, a space gate opened up to let him out. With a breath of relief, Ming Dong looked at the split body of Ka Zhefei and said, "I told you I'd split you in half. Let's see if you believe me now." With that, he walked away and into the space gate. The space gate behind Ka Zhefei opened up, as well as several of the members of Mercenary City quickly came in and started to clean up the arena. Ming Dong returned to Jian Chen's side as everyone stared at him in a new light. Each one now had a deep fear imprinted on them. Even Karaga looked at Ming Dong with a completely new emotion. Jian Chen and Ming Dong gave each other a mutual look before the both of them sat down on stools to watch the rest of the matches. At this moment, Qin Ji walked up to Ming Dong with a respectful posture. "Congratulations to brother Ming Dong for becoming one of the top 10. With your strength, getting into the top 3 will not be an impossible task." With a laugh, Ming Dong began to speak to Qin Ji for a little while. As the two talked, the finals continued with the usual marvelousness, but after the match between Ming Dong and Ka Zhefei, nothing could compare to their beautiful clash. Thus, every match after did not seem as exciting. After the 8 matches had been concluded, 8 winners were established. Aridyazar Jian Chen Ming Dong, Bailey Tong, Karaga and Zhangsun Yinfeng. Much to the shock of Jian Chen, the wind attributed Earth Saint Master that he had came across before while hunting for tokens had made it into the top 8, Zhangsun Yinfeng. After the top 8 had been established, Zhu and Tian Muling had managed to make their way back into the top 10 after winning the losers bracket. At last, the 10 names of the contestants were complete. Aridya, Zar, Jianchen, Ming Dong, Qinji, Bailey Tong, Karaga, Zhangsun Yinfeng, Zhu and Tian Muling. Afterward, the competition prepared to move forward. The tournament would not end until the king of mercenaries was found. Only the top 8 contestants would be able to compete, as well as Tian Muling and Zhu, who had both made the 9th and 10th spots. The 8 people began to pick their numbers so that an announcement could be made. Then the announcement came: Jian Chen versus Karaga, Ming Dong versus Zhangsun Yinfeng, Qinji versus Tsar, Aridya versus Bailey Tong. The final rounds would be held 3 days later, as each competitor went into a special and prepared for them to rest. The entire inn was protected by a barrier, so that only the competitors could enter. At the same time, they couldn't exit the barrier. All of the inn workers were trusted aides of Mercenary City. During those 3 days, Jian Chen spent the majority of his time ensuring that his body would be in peak condition. After that, he took out the Duanyan sword and the seal of Treasure Mountain to inspect them. After fiddling with them for half a day, he had came to a final conclusion. He would not be able to use either ruler armaments, and even if he were to use his own Saint Force to force it into them, it would be eliminated. The seal of Treasure Mountain was as the 4 brothers of the Kai family said. Jian Chen would not be able to use it, and the seal of Treasure Mountain was nothing more than a broken piece of iron in his hands. Could it be that the words of those 4 were true? A ruler armament requires the right bloodline in order to be used? Jian Chen thought as he eyed the item. This was the only explanation that made sense to him. Afterward, Jian Chen placed both ruler armaments back into his space ring and began his study of the illusionary flash. In the past few days, the 4 brothers of the Kai family had already relayed the news of Shi Xiangran's death by Jian Chen's hands, as well as the capture of the ruler armament to the Shi family. The very moment the Shi family heard the news, the family head was shocked beyond relief and grew angrier by the second. Even though Shi Xiangran was the 3rd son, his cultivation talent was far beyond everyone else. He was an outstanding person that appeared once in a millennia. For hours after receiving the news, 2 Heaven Saint Masters were dispatched to Mercenary City. Chapter 336. 2 moves. 3 days went by in a flash. Every competitor had their bodies in peak condition for the finals. Outside of the barrier, there was a lot of chatter and many discussions on who would be the winner, causing people to start to bet. Every single one of the gamblers wanted to win big, so the overall sum was well over 10 million purple coins. However, most of the bets were on Ming Dong being the winner, while everyone else had a 10th of the votes. By the afternoon, Mercenary City was completely filled. The amount of people that came here today was quite a bit more than the amount from the previous days, causing all of the streets that led to the plaza to be completely congested. Jianchun and Karaga both stood in the opposite ends of the arena, while giving fierce looks at each other. Brat, you and that Ming Dong seem quite close. Ming Dong has killed my brother Ka Jiafei. Today, I shall spill your blood as a sacrifice to Ka Jiafei's soul. Then, Ming Dong will have his turn to accompany you. Karaga glared at Jianchun. Jianchun snorted as he gave a small smirk. Your brother Ka Jiafei and Ming Dong had said similar words to each other. And in the end, Ka Jiafei was split in two by Ming Dong. Today, your words scare me just as much as Ka Jiafei's words scared Ming Dong. You will see that the person who falls today will be you. Do you think yourself as Ming Dong? The fact that Ming Dong is a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master is something that I did not expect. And neither did I think that he had such a strong heaven-tier battle skill. Ka Jiafei's death at Ming Dong's hands was not wrong. But are you also a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master? If you are one, then I, Karaga, will immediately admit defeat and kowtow my head thrice. Karaga sneered with disdain. With an impassive look, Jianchun replied, There is no need for you to know my strength. Just know that you need not kowtow, because you will not leave here alive. Remember that each and every word of yours comes at a heavy price. With that, Jianchun's killing intent began to leak out from him. With a cold smile, Karaga began to exude his own killing intent, but not another word was spoken. Begin! A loud voice called out into the barrier. A silver-white two-handed sword that was 2 meters long appeared in Karaga's hand, flickering with a faint white glow that made it seem almost holy. At the same time, Jianchun's light wind sword could be seen materializing in his own right hand. Holding it in front of him, Jianchun spoke, If you have that strange armor, then you would best put it on or risk losing the chance to later. At this, Karaga's face grew hot with fury. In the past, no matter where he went, he had been respected and revered by all. However, today, he had been scorned by a single youth no older than the age of 20. For the high and mighty Karaga, he could not bear this. With an angry roar, he yelled, It seems as if you don't even know how to write the character for death. There is no need for me to use the Radiant Saint armor against you, die. With that, he flew at Jianchun and swung out with his giant longsword with all the power a 5th cycle Earth Saint Master could muster. Karaga's strength could equal Ming Dong's own despite him being a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master. Jianchun stared icily at Karaga as an azure and violet light appeared on his light wind sword, causing the silver light on the blade to intensify. The very moment Qin Ji and Tian Muling saw the light, their eyes immediately zoned in on Jianchun's sword. To be accurate, the light on the light wind sword was quite eye-catching, and they couldn't help but remember what had happened back in the Immortal's Cave. Jianchun had easily shattered the barriers of Shixiangran and Jetta Wukong with that very light. Right now they suddenly remembered that Jianchun was using those same lights. The azure and violet sword Qi was quite weak now, but because of the silver glow from the light wind sword, the azure and violet sword Qi was quite noticeable and eye-catching. Karaga noticed the sudden azure and violet sword Qi, but whatever purpose it served he did not care to take notice. Instead, he carried on to slash at Jianchun's waist. At the same time, Jianchun took action as well as the light wind sword clashed with Karaga's own sword with a violent crash. Bang! A wild explosion burst out of the two saint weapons, but because Karaga's saint weapon was much stronger than Jianchun, the sword Qi on the light wind sword had been scattered for the most part. A kaleidoscopic picture of sword Qi flew out and impacted against the barrier, without a single scratch on it, before the sword Qi disappeared from reality. Although Jianchun's sword had most of its sword Qi scattered, the azure and violet sword Qi was not affected. Just as those two in Karaga's Radiant Saint force made contact, Karaga's sword became like a rotten piece of wood that instantly chipped away, as the light wind sword left behind a 2-finger-wide hole in it. Feeling the damage from his saint weapon, Karaga stifled a shout as his face went white, and he spat out some blood. Mere seconds after Jianchun's sword had smashed against Karaga's sword, Jianchun continued up with a second strike with his sword in a split second. While the strike had only been for a moment, the power and speed in which it had struck out was inconceivable. Karaga could feel the damage done to his saint weapon with a shocked expression. As the azure and violet sword chi flashed in between his eyes again, he immediately remembered his surroundings and quickly increased the distance between him and Jianchen. However, Jianchen had somehow managed to get behind Karaga, while holding his sword in an elegant-like position without moving. Outside of the arena, everyone began to point wildly at the scene with loud chattering of amazement at the initial strike. Who do you think will win? Of course it'll be Karaga. It's definitely Karaga. I've heard that he and Kajafe are extremely close. Even Kajafe was a 5th cycle Earth Saint Master. Karaga's strength is definitely just as strong, but I'm not sure if he has a heaven-tier battle skill or not. But Jianchen's strength isn't bad either. He's quite young. What age do you guys think? I would say 20 years old. He couldn't have been cultivating for that long. That's right, Jianchen couldn't have been cultivating for more than a dozen to 20 years. I can also see that he is an attributeless Saint Force cultivator as well. He cannot compete with Karaga, who is a Radiant Saint Force attributed cultivator. He is also called the Undying by most, and is incredibly strong. Who could possibly kill him? Suddenly, the chatter immediately stopped as everyone saw the bright red line on Karaga's neck. The red line began to grow wider before the entire neck seemed to be completely red. Even before the line could become completely red, everyone had already came to the conclusion that the line was blood. Like a water fountain, blood began to spill from Karaga's neck as he fell to the ground. His neck already had a pool of blood forming beneath his body. Then, his head rolled away from the body, causing the blood to pour from his neck in a steady stream, covering the entire arena with blood. Outside of the arena, everyone had gone into a mute shock, as they stared at the scene in the arena with wide eyes and looks of amazement. For someone strong with a Radiant Saint Force like Karaga, it was unexpected for him to be beheaded by the young-looking Jianchen as soon as the match had started. This was such a wide gap in skill, everyone found it almost hard to believe. As if ignoring everyone else, the moment the announcement was revealed, Jianchen walked out of the space gate and into the staging area, where everyone was staring at him with wide eyes, as if they had no idea whether or not someone was coming back. What a fast sword! For him to stab outward in less than a single second. This type of strength is far too much. It seems that his sword has a secret regarding those two strange lights. If it could cut a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master's weapon. A Heaven Saint Master Elder spoke in admiration. Leaving the arena, Jianchen had found it hard to contain his excitement. This wasn't excitement from winning, but excitement from seeing his azure and violet sword chi growing in strength once more. Though everyone had seen the glows, Jianchen had been able to behead Karaga, so Ming Dong naturally congratulated him. The other competitors' outlook on Jianchen had now changed by a lot. They all replaced Karaga with him as the #1 person here. Everyone had a strange fear of him, now almost as if he were a bigger threat than Ming Dong. Jianchen's beheading slash of Karaga took less than a second, practically faster than a thunderclap. Even they hadn't seen what had transpired inside the arena, since Jianchen's speed was just far too fast for them to notice. Chapter 337. The finals. The next fight was between Ming Dong and Zhongsun Yunfeng. After a short break, the arena was back to normal, allowing Ming Dong to enter via the space gate. However, before he could cross through, Jianchen pulled him aside, and with a sharp glance toward Zhongsun Yunfeng, spoke a few words of warning. With a clench of his fist, a spark of killing intent could be seen in Ming Dong's eyes as he spoke. "Don't worry, Brother Qin Xiao has been kind to us. I, Ming Dong, will take revenge for him." With that, he stalked into the arena. Zhongsun Yunfeng was a middle-aged man, who looked quite refined, almost as if he was a wise scholar. His eyes wavered when he saw Jianchen and Ming Dong talking together, as his heart began to beat faster. With some hesitation, he finally gritted his teeth and strode into the arena with his head held high. Quickly, both combatants entered the arena with Ming Dong staring at Zhongsun Yunfeng with a look that held none of his killing intent back. This caused Zhongsun Yunfeng to feel a bit startled, before taking on a more serious look. He and Jianchen already had a small conflict in the past, and Jianchen and Ming Dong were on good terms with each other, allowed him to deduce from these two facts that Jianchen had asked Ming Dong to eliminate him. "Begin!" the announcer cried out. Without hesitation after hearing the announcement, he disappeared without a single trace and flew at Zhang Sun Yunfeng in an instant. "I admit defeat." A mere moment after the match had started, Zhang Sun Yunfeng cried out immediately. He had personally seen Ming Dong and Ka Zhafei's fight for himself, and knew that Ming Dong's strength was not something that he himself could be an opponent of. Ming Dong had no intention of sparing Zhang Sun Yunfeng, and instantly reappeared right in front of him, with his Saint Force exploding out from his body as he lashed out with his sword. At the same time, a powerful sword appeared and pressed against Zhang Sun Yunfeng's body, causing him to feel as if he was stuck in a quagmire and could not move. Earth-tier battle skill, Zhang Sun Yunfeng spoke in shock. He had no idea that Ming Dong would have such an attack, and would be so familiar with the skill, that he could use it straight away. Ming Dong's sword came slamming down onto Zhang Sun Yunfeng's head with a domineering pressure and speed that had rendered him unable to defend or even move against Ming Dong's attack. At the same time, the barrier came crashing down like a curtain from the heavens, separating Ming Dong and Zhang Sun Yunfeng from each other. Ming Dong's strike crashed against the barrier with a resounding bang, but the energy from the shock wave was absorbed into the barrier, like a pebble in the ocean, without a single trace of damage. When one of the combatant admits defeat, then the other combatant is forbidden from making any further attacks. Ming Dong is the winner. A loud voice boomed out as two space gates opened up on both sides. Staring vehemently at Zhang Sun Yunfeng, Ming Dong let out a helpless sigh, before walking back to his space gate dejectedly. With his own sigh of relief, Zhang Sun Yunfeng was extremely grateful for the last-second protection against Ming Dong. If it were not for that, then he would have been killed by Ming Dong's attack, and would not live to see himself walk out of the arena. Zhang Sun Yunfeng stared in fear at the retreating back of Ming Dong, before walking himself sadly back to his own space gate. He had spent 40 long years cultivating, so that he could attain such a strong power. But he hadn't thought that some youth under the age of 30 would have been able to force him into such a miserable state. The next match was between Qin Ji and Czar. Although Qin Ji had a ruler armament, he could not use it in this match, because of the barrier placed onto him being restricted. The match was extremely short since Qin Ji was incapable of hurting Czar with his Radiant Saint armor, leaving Czar as the winner. The final round was between Aridia and Bailey Tong. Both of them were well-built men. Bailey Tong had the strength of a 5th cycle Earth Saint Master. The fight lasted an hour before, finally, Bailey Tong managed to strike at Adiria for the win. Thus, the 4 strongest had been established: Jianchen, Ming Dong, Czar and Bailey Tong. After a day of rest, the finals started straight away. With the matches being determined, the list of names had been released. What caused both Ming Dong and Jianchen to feel gloomy was that they had been pitted against each other at last. Czar had been paired up against Bailey Tong, who had a ruler armament as well. In the arena, Jianchen and Ming Dong both stared at each other helplessly. Luck had played with them, and the heavens had pulled one final joke at their expense. This day would end with the final 2 strongest being established. If Jianchen and Ming Dong hadn't been pitted against each other, then there would have been a good chance for them to be 1st and 2nd place. Because of the will of the heavens, one of the 2 men would be eliminated. "Begin," the announcer called out, but not a single person made a move. "Ming Dong, you are quite strong, so I trust that you will be able to be number 1, don't disappoint me." Jianchen spoke. He had every intention to admit defeat here. He knew in his heart that if he did not use his azure and violet sword Qi, he would not be an opponent for Ming Dong at all. After all, Ming Dong was a wind-attributed 6th cycle Earth Saint Master, and had a better comprehension of the illusionary flash. Compared to Ming Dong, Jianchen had no chance of winning. "I admit defeat." Just as Jianchen opened his mouth to admit defeat, Ming Dong beat him to it. Seeing the amazed look on Jianchen's face, Ming Dong laughed. "Jianchen, your strength isn't any weaker than mine. I believe that you can grab the 1st place, so don't you dare disappoint me." With a forced smile, Jianchen replied. Ming Dong, you becoming first place is not a difficult task. Why did you give me the chance to do so instead? Because you need it more. Jianchen, Uncle Tian told me that whoever is first place within the gathering of the mercenaries will be able to cultivate in the holy grounds of Mercenary City for half a year. Jianchen, you know that I am already at the peak of the 6th cycle Earth Saint Master. At any given time, I can make the breakthrough to become a Heaven Saint Master. So the holy grounds is of no use to me. You, on the other hand, are in a different situation. Ming Dong spoke seriously. Smiling more freely now, Jianchen said, Then fine, Ming Dong. Since you have given me the chance, I won't dare let you down now. Congratulations on your win. Ming Dong laughed. What Ming Dong didn't know was that when he had conceded the match, countless of people howled out in anger and cursed. That was because everyone had bet on Ming Dong, being the number one person in the competition. When they had placed all their bets on Ming Dong, and now witnessed him admit defeat, the money they had spent was thrown away. The final conclusion between Jianchen and Ming Dong had been far beyond what anyone had expected. Only those who had some familiarity with the two had a look of smugness on their faces. They knew that Ming Dong and Jianchen had been with each other for some time, and while they knew that Ming Dong was extremely strong, he had always treated Jianchen as the leader, almost as if he was the boss. The millions of people within Mercenary City began to talk among themselves, as everyone that had bet on Ming Dong felt extremely dissatisfied. It was only until a Heaven Saint Master commented that Jianchen himself was not weak at all, and had proved it when he beheaded Karaga in an instant. After that, anyone who had expressed their dissatisfaction at Ming Dong's defeat grew quiet. For those who had placed a large sum of money on Ming Dong, they could only drop their heads and wallow in their sadness. No matter how loud the chatter was, not a single person within the arena could hear it because of the soundproofing characteristic of the barrier. So Ming Dong and Jianchen had not heard a single word. Afterward, Zar and Bailey Tong stepped into the arena. Zar had already reached the 6th cycle Earth Saint Master level, and had a small repertoire of strong battle skills. Bailey Tong was only at a 4th cycle Earth Saint Master strength, but had a ruler armament. Yet this would not be very effective against the Radiant Saint armor of Zar. With Zar also being able to heal himself with his Radiant Saint force, the battle did not take long, with the Radiant Warrior, Zar, being the winner. The final round of the competition, and the most important one, would take place the following day. Because this was the final battle, it would give rise to the strongest individual of the gathering of the mercenaries, and would be given the honor of being called the King of Mercenaries. During the following day of rest, Jianchen disregarded the break, and put all of his efforts into comprehending the illusionary flash. He had already attained the first layer of mastery with the Heaven's Stolen Fortune, and could increase his strength 3 times over. This was already a pleasing result to Jianchen, so he did not need to worry anymore on studying the Heaven's Stolen Fortune, since it would be impossible for him to make the second layer in such a short amount of time. Even if he were to somehow gain mastery of the second layer, his fighting strength would not be all that much different in relativity, since his strength would only be multiplied by 4 times. Even with his 1st cycle Earth Saint Master strength multiplied by 4, it would not be able to contend against a Heaven Saint Master. Rather than that outcome, Jianchen threw all of his time and effort toward studying the illusionary flash. He was not focusing on getting first place of the gathering of the mercenaries, since he had a great deal of confidence in getting it already. What Jianchen truly did fear was the Jetta clan and Shi family. He could anticipate that the moment he left Mercenary City, there would be experts from both powers coming to kill him and take back the ruler armaments. The grudges between him and the 2 powers would never be dissolved, since he was far too weak. Chapter 338. Zar's condition. The next day, countless people waited for the finals to finally start. This was the day that the King of Mercenaries would be established. The bicentennial gathering of the mercenaries was finally coming to a close. The news of Zar fighting against Jianchen had been the focus of everyone's banter. Even several Heaven Saint Masters had personally came to watch the fight before trying to predict who would win. In the end, The final conclusion was that the two men were not that different in strength. Tsar was over the age of 45, but also below the age 50 with the strength of a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master, and had the radiant saint force. Because of that, he was called the Undying by many since he could heal any injury he might receive. His natural advantages were plenty, and he was as complex as the two other radiant warriors from before. Neither audience nor combatants knew of his battle skills, except for the exceptionally strong armor he had. However, many people speculated that he had a single heaven-tier battle skill at the very least. Jianchen was most likely above the age of 20, and below the age of 25 with the strength of a 1st or 2nd cycle Earth Saint Master. He had no known attributed saint force, but his strikes were incredibly deadly. His sword was incredibly fast, and could make it hard for a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master to dodge. Moreover, he could maintain that speed for a long period of time, without feeling the side effects of this supernatural movement. And because of some sort of martial arts, his movements were incredibly fast. He had no known battle skill, but he had a single hidden secret that could shatter the saint weapon of a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master. When he utilizes the azure and violet glows of light, his fighting strength was suddenly multiplied, and many people speculated that this was definitely a heaven-tier battle skill. When information regarding the two's strength had been revealed, everyone immediately took notice, and within the same day people began to gamble once more. Because this was the final round, every single gambler had placed high stakes on the match. Many of the wealthier men had wagered hundreds of thousands of purple coins on the two, making the pot of the entire bet count up to over 100 million purple coins. Because of the ambiguity over the two combatants' strength, there were people that looked at Jianchen favorably, and people who looked at Tsar favorably, for an almost equal outcome. Half the people had bet on Jianchen, the other half had bet on Tsar. How lively. I would like to bet 100,000 purple coins on brother Jianchen to win it all. Tian Muling took out the appropriate sum of money to hand it over. I too would like to bet on brother Jianchen's victory. 500,000 purple coins. Qin Ji strode forward and took out the money from his space belt. I'd like to bet 1,000 purple coins on Jianchen. That's all I have. Seniorin brought out a smaller stack of money onto the table. 30,000 purple coins on Jianchen. All of my personal wealth rests upon Jianchen's shoulders. Qin Xiao spoke out in a grand voice. 10,000 purple coins on Jianchen. Dugafeng wasn't one to be left behind, and spoke to the one taking the bets with a calm look. In the arena, Jianchen and Tsar both stood quietly across from each other. Jianchen stood in carefree manner in front of Tsar with his sword in hand, the point of the sword resting on the ground, yet a piercing stare was honed in on Tsar. Tsar was a sturdily built man who was about 2 meters tall, and had a chilling stare as he looked at Jianchen. He had come fully prepared by wearing his silver-colored armor, where wisps of radiant saint force could be seen revolving around it, basking the area around him in a glowing light, and giving him the appearance of a holy person. The only place that had not been covered by the armor were the two spots where his eyes were. Holding his bright saint weapon above his head, the armored Tsar looked like a revered war god. The two had already stood in the arena for some time, before instantly bursting into action as the announcer made the call. Suddenly, the war god-like Tsar spoke from within his silver armor. Jianchen, although you are using some sort of special method to hide your presence, I can tell that your saint force is not far away from my own. With your young age, I am sure that with time, you will reach the peak of the Tianyuan continent. So in this battle, whether I win or lose, I hope that we will remain friends and not enemies. Jianchen was slightly shocked after hearing those words, but he stared at Tsar with a strange look. We've killed your comrades Karaga and Kajafei. Did you not wish to avenge them? Even under the helmet, there seemed to be no difference in his emotion as Tsar spoke calmly. I admit, Karaga and Kajafei both came from the same place as I, but our affiliations are with a different power. We are not friends, but instead competitors. Our relationship with each other is quite subtle, and if it was any worse, then it would have become hostile. With you and Ming Dong killing the both of them, I should thank you. In fact, you've eliminated potential enemies in my future. Tsar let out a long sigh. This triple entente between the three of us has gone on for too long. Perhaps it was time for it to be smashed apart. Tsar said before speaking once more. Jianchen, no matter how this battle goes, I truly hope that we will remain friends. Jianchen's eyes flashed with a strange light. He knew that this was an unknown situation where he was at great risks of being dragged into a terrible battleground. With some thought, Jianchen said, I can only say that we will not be enemies. As for friends, that cannot be easily done with so few words. Tsar nodded his head. That is true enough. If just saying these words were enough for two strangers to become friends, then the value of friendship would be absolutely worthless. Jianchen, I know that you are determined to be first place, but do you have the strength to overcome me? Jianchen's eyes flashed with a strange look as he tried to understand what Tsar was trying to get at. But he opened his mouth and replied anyways. Partially. Tsar laughed. It seems that you have confidence in yourself. With that, Tsar took out his long sword, and then another silver-bladed sword from within his space ring. Jianchen, if I were to use this saint weapon, how sure are you that you will be able to beat me? Jianchen took a look at the new weapon in Tsar's hand with a bright stare. If my guess is correct, that is a ruler armament. Without any other words, Tsar laughed once more. Correct, this is a ruler armament. Jianchen, if I were to use this, then how sure are you that you would be able to beat me? Jianchen stayed mysteriously silent, giving no reply. Continuing to speak, Tsar said, Jianchen, you must know that just the two of us reaching this step was not easy. The requirements for the gathering of the mercenaries didn't allow many of the geniuses born at the wrong time to participate. So no matter if it is you or me that desires first place, we both will not easily renounce it. With our strength being so close to each other, we will have to fight with all our power to attain first place. And since we must defeat the other in order to become first, I will indeed try my best. Tsar suddenly stopped his speech to look at Jianchen for a brief moment. But if you could agree to my request, I will renounce my attempt and give you the spot of first place. Hearing this, Jianchen kept a calm look on his face, but his mind instantly began to think back to the first words that Tsar had said. In a flash, he had came to a conclusion that there would be a possibility for him to be involved in a clash between major powers. Tsar's condition was quite alluring, but for such an alluring condition, there would definitely be an equally heavy price to pay for it. Tsar must have seen Jianchen's potential, as well as the relationship he had with Ming Dong, or greatly desired to have the support of the powers behind the both of them. Whichever the situation was, Jianchen would definitely not want to agree to him. My apologies, but I believe that this battle should be won using our own strengths, not words. Jianchen spoke calmly with a neutral expression. Jianchen, did you not even want to hear what my request was? Tsar asked. There is no need. Jianchen replied. Jianchen, this is your chance to become first place. I am not afraid to tell you, but I am in possession of a middle heaven tier battle skill and a ruler armament. Did you think you could beat me? Tsar asked. Jianchen had a deep smile on his face as he replied. Tsar, if you cannot hit me, then the ruler armament in your hand has no use. As for the heaven tier battle skill, while they are indeed powerful, they require time to employ. If you dare try to initialize your heaven tier battle skill, then I can guarantee that you will not be able to release it. My sword will strike at your throat. If it were not for the helmet on Tsar's face, then the facial change would have been noticeable to everyone. He stared blankly at Jianchen for a moment, before laughing for a good while. This was the first time he had ever thought his words had been so useless, and suffered so much by the younger generation. After a short period of time, Tsar let out a sigh as he stared at Jianchen and thought, if only my son was as remarkable as you, that would be great. Even if I were to reduce my life by 100 years, if not 1,000 or even 10,000 years, I would agree. Jianchen was speechless. Chapter 339. The Soul Sword. Once more, the moment Ming Dong saw the ruler armament in Tsar's hand from the outside, his face grew startled. Crap! I didn't think he would have a ruler armament. His secret was cleverly hidden until now. This will be troublesome to see if Jianchen will be able to beat him. The next moment, the two fighters spared no more words and waited for the match to officially start. 2 hours had passed, and if Czar hadn't made a move, then Jianchen would have thought that the match had long since started. He hadn't heard the call, but the time he had waited was already far too long. He had came here in the morning, and now it was almost noon. The blazing hot sun was already high in the air, and its hot golden light rays poured down, basking the entire area with a golden color. Despite the sun blazing overhead, not a single person felt the heat. It was already winter in season, so the temperature was not unbearable. Only a few really noticed the sunlight's heat, but they thought it to be more comfortable than not, unlike summer heat, which everyone came to hate. It is now the 3rd hour, let the competition begin. Suddenly, the voice of the announcer could be heard. Hearing this, Jianchen almost felt like spitting out blood. He had no idea that he and Czar would be standing around like idiots until the 1st hour past the start of the afternoon for the match to begin. Tai. On the other side, Czar had already burst into motion as his radiant saint force exploded away from him. With his ruler armament high in the air with a divine-like radiance, his entire person seemed equally divine in spirit, making him seem like a war god. As the ruler armament was waved in the air, a large amount of sword chi suddenly flew out toward Jianchen like a crescent moon. Its power was so strong that even while flying through the air, the crescent-shaped sword chi began to distort. For a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master to wield a ruler armament, the amount of energy that would be released would be much more than Dugufeng. The crescent-shaped sword chi flew at Jianchen, who was instantly torn apart, allowing the attack to continue on. It exploded against the barrier, where it disappeared like a pebble within the ocean. Seeing how Jianchen had been smashed apart by the crescent sword chi, the entire audience all gasped in shock and amazement. However, the cries were all cut short as they realized it had only been a mirror image of Jianchen that had been hit. The real one suddenly reappeared behind Czar with his light wind sword glowing with a faint azure and violet sword chi, before stabbing at his back. Czar didn't even bother to turn around, and immediately swung his ruler armament behind him. The energy from the ruler armament burst outward with a shaking sensation, almost as if the area around it could not handle the energy output. Growing serious at the blow, Jianchen could feel that the amount of power Czar had while using the ruler armament was far stronger than that of Qingji and Dugufeng by a good amount. Jianchen wouldn't be able to handle a fraction of the ruler armament's power, let alone the entire force of it. Taking back his sword, Jianchen immediately used the illusionary flash and left behind a mirror image for the ruler armament to attack, while reappearing behind Czar to stab at him with his azure and violet sword chi once more. Without even moving to dodge Jianchen's blow, Czar brandished his ruler armament so that his ruler armament would strike Jianchen. Jianchen had been fearful of Czar's ruler armament. He knew just how strong the azure and violet sword chi were. But the ruler armament was not Czar's saint weapon. Even if he were able to shatter the ruler armament, it would not diminish Czar's fighting ability too much. For the sake of his own safety, he had to take back his strike once more and dodge the ruler armament. The two men continued to go at each other in a fierce exchange of blows that never connected as they dodged, making the fight seem almost silent. Czar knew that Jianchen's speed was far too fast, so he hadn't tried to dodge Jianchen's attacks, and instead tried to meet the blows head for head. His ruler armament was brandished in a wide area, so that Jianchen would be forced to pull back his own sword at the last moment to avoid collision. Jianchen was already utilizing the illusionary flash to the best of his ability, and traveled in a circle around Czar rapidly. In less than a few moments, the two men had exchanged multiple strikes, with not a single person being able to do a thing to the other. The formidable amount of power coming from Czar's ruler armament struck fear into Jianchen's heart. He also knew that he didn't dare risk for a mutually assured destruction with Czar, because he wasn't sure if the ruler armament would be able to cut him in half. With the amount of power that was exuding from the ruler armament, he didn't want to test it out. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared in Jianchen's eyes as he dashed backward, while stabbing at Czar with the azure and violet sword chi-infused light wind sword in every position. The armor that Tsar was wearing was strong enough that even Ming Dong would normally be helpless against it. Jian Chen's regular strikes wouldn't be enough to dent it, so he needed to borrow the power of the azure and violet sword qi. With an angry shout, Tsar brought his ruler armament up close to him, so that the light wind sword would be useless against it and scatter all of the sword qi away. I, Jian Chen, doubt that I would be unable to deal with this situation. He snorted before revealing an eye full of rage that made it seem as if they contained fire instead. In an instant, the light wind sword separated from his hand and transformed into a silver ray of light that shot toward Tsar with impeccable speed. The light wind sword seemed to have almost reached the speed of light, making it almost impossible for anyone to see. At this moment, Jian Chen was using most of his soul to utilize the soul sword. The flight of the light wind sword would have astounded the entire audience to a new level if seen by them, even as the sword began to conceal itself within a faint mist. Ding! Before Tsar could even react, the light wind sword had already struck against his armor. But because Jian Chen had underestimated just how strong the defenses were, the sword had only left behind a small trace of damage. Although Tsar had suffered no injuries, the light wind sword had still traveled at an incredible speed and pushed him back a few steps with a large amount of force. The moment he had seen the silver streak of light, his face instantly slackened with shock as he cried out, "Just how is this possible? Just what did you use to hit me?" Because of Jian Chen's efforts, the light wind sword had flew at a speed and direction that made it impossible for Tsar to take notice, so he was completely unaware of what had been used to hit him. Jian Chen ignored Tsar's surprised outcry and slowly closed his eyes to sense the existence of his light wind sword. Using his spirit to control the light wind sword, he and the sword achieved a harmonized state of mind. He was the sword, and the sword was he. The two beings were one and not two. Just as Jian Chen had delved into this state of mind, the azure and violet sword spirits suddenly began to shake within his dantian. The multicolored stone also began to shake, as if it were extremely happy, like an overly excited child. Ding 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 ding. A series of echoes could be heard as Tsar's body continued to dance in a strange motion. With each step he took he was driven back, so that he staggered in a new direction each second. Several times, he was on the verge of falling to the ground. It was evident to see that he was in a bad position. On his armor, a chain of firework-like sparks could be seen as they lit up his radiant saint armor and left several impressions in it. Just what in the world is happening? What trickery is this? Tsar cried out in shock and anger. Jian Chen and his sword were now one, and with him placing all of his strength on controlling the light wind sword, its speed was practically invisible to the naked eye. Even though Tsar was being constantly assaulted by strikes, he couldn't see just what was hitting him. The light wind sword continued to rain down on Tsar's body with an unbelievable amount of strength. Each strike rocked his body, making him unsteady. At last, Tsar stabbed his ruler armament into the ground to anchor his position, while allowing the invisible strikes to continue to pelter him unobstructed. His radiant saint armor was valiantly durable and was comparable to even Shi Xiangran's defensive barrier. No matter how many strikes hit him, they did no damage to him at all. Just what in the heavens is this? Tsar stared in bafflement toward the immobile Jian Chen. He had no idea how many times he had spoken those words now, but it went without saying that he was extremely curious to know just what trickery Jian Chen was doing. Outside of the arena, every single person gasped in shock with their eyes wide open as they watched the show happening right in front of them. All they could see was the stationary Jian Chen, who seemed like a stone statue, and Tsar, who was 20 meters away with his ruler armament stabbed deep into the ground. His hands were clenched onto the ruler armament, while a series of sparks flashed across his armor. This strange show left everyone absolutely mystified on how exactly this situation came to be and what was causing it. Chapter 340. The Holy Land. The spectating Qin Ji had a strange look of puzzlement on his face as he observed the two men. Just what are they doing? It seems Tsar is being assaulted by attacks in an endless stream, but I don't see where they're coming from. Also, the sword from Jian Chen's hand is missing. Jian Chen is quite definitely a strange one. Someone far more mysterious than I had initially thought. Even Qin Ji was incapable of spotting the light-wind sword since the speed it was traveling at was beyond what he could detect with his naked eye, meaning that he could only see the sparks flying off Czar's armor, without know just how Jian Chen was involved. On the other side, Ming Dong looked on with some relief at the sight of Czar being showered with sparks. With a small smile he muttered, "It is no wonder that he is a brother of mine. He is quite special. It seems that in this case, it won't be much longer until Czar loses. To think I was worrying over this fight for nothing. Oh, little brother seems to have hidden such a mysterious thing. For him to force the ruler armament-wielding Czar to eat up such a loss. I bet that Czar would have died a long time ago if it were not for his armor. However, how did little brother get so much strength? Since it is an attack that is invisible to everyone, it is not that easy to defend against. I can tell that being an opponent of his would not be a smart choice." Tian Muling stared at the arena with eyes that flashed with wonder. Even the yellow-robed Huang Luan was staring at Jian Chen with a dazed look. Her expression was exceptionally complex. Her mind couldn't help but think back to the first time she had met Jian Chen, that awkward meeting at the river. She then thought about when she saw him, during the survival competition. Are you really the same man as before? Huang Luan wondered absent-mindedly as she looked at Jian Chen, and muttered to herself. She could clearly remember a few years back Jian Chen was not worthy of being her opponent, and wasn't capable of dealing any damage to her. She had no idea that after some time, she would meet the much stronger Jian Chen who could outmatch her by a long distance. In the arena, Czar held his ground tenaciously as he clutched at his ruler armament with great force as he shouted, "Jian Chen, you cannot harm me, while my radiant saint armor is up, so don't waste your energy. While I don't know just how you are doing this, I do know that you won't be able to keep it up for long. Just wait until your energy runs out, then you will lose." As if he hadn't heard Czar's roar, Jian Chen continued to hold his eyelids shut while twitching his finger. On that finger, a faint glow of azure and violet sword chi could be seen before it was shot straight toward Czar. At the moment Czar's movements were restricted, forcing him to brace himself with the ruler armament to withstand the attacks. Therefore, he wasn't able to move whatsoever, and could only watch as the azure and violet sword chi drew closer to him. Seeing the azure and violet sword chi, Czar felt himself starting to panic. Although he had confidence in his radiant saint armor, and his strength as a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master, with a heaven-tier battle skill, he couldn't help but think back to when this very sword chi had damaged Kuraga's saint weapon. For the very first time, Czar felt doubt appear in his heart. Could his radiant saint armor's defenses be destroyed by this azure and violet sword chi? Even as he had that fleeting thought for a mere moment, the azure and violet sword chi continued on, flying straight at his chest. Without a sound, a small hole suddenly opened up in his armor, as the azure and violet sword chi carved a hole into his body. With a grunt, Czar could feel his body starting to shake. The moment the azure and violet sword chi entered his body, it had begun to bounce around inside. Each and every moment, Czar could feel that his organs were one step closer to being completely damaged to pieces. "Ah!" Czar let out a heaven-piercing roar as the veins in his forehead suddenly bulged. All of the saint force within his body immediately surged to wrap the azure and violet sword chi in order to eradicate it from his body. While the azure and violet sword chi was weak, its power was still enough to cause Czar to be incredibly fearful. He used all of his saint force to intervene. But not only did it fail, the azure and violet sword chi continued to wreck his inner organs. As the azure and violet sword chi bounced around Czar's insides, it continued to whittle away at his chance to live. Not only was a man's interior body their weakest point, it was also the most fatal area. With the azure and violet sword chi destroying his insides, in less than a few breaths, Czar had already suffered several serious injuries. Just what in the world is this force? Who hurry up and take it back, take back this force. Czar had a terrified look on his face as he cried out to Jian Chen. At this moment, the azure and violet sword chi was bouncing for his heart, and if it were to get too close, then his heart would be instantly shredded apart like tofu. Even a radiant warrior would not be able to survive an injury like that. A faint streak of silver light appeared within Jian Chen's hand as he slowly opened his eyes, revealing a tired expression. With a sudden sway of his body, he flashed in front of the beaten Tsar and placed his palm against Tsar's chest. The very moment Jian Chen placed his palm against Tsar's chest, the azure and violet sword qi that was causing havoc inside his chest instantly turned docile like a sheep. Just like how an obedient child would behave, it slowly moved out of Tsar's chest and into Jian Chen's palm, where it blended in with the sword spirits within Jian Chen's dantian. Feeling the presence of the azure and violet sword qi dissipate from his body, Tsar let out a sigh of relief before staring at Jian Chen with a frightened voice. Just what in the world was that force? It was so strong that it easily managed to shatter my radiant saint armor. He quavered. Tsar, I've won this battle. Jian Chen spoke with a smile. Knowing that Jian Chen would not talk anymore about the strange azure and violet sword qi, he decided not to talk anymore about the subject, and nodded his head sadly. You've won indeed. With that, the radiant saint armor on Tsar's body began to disappear from sight. It was only at this point that Tsar's face could be seen, a deathly white color. The clothes that he wore underneath the armor had already been dyed a bloody red from the attack of the azure and violet sword qi. At that moment, the barrier that had been surrounding the arena suddenly disappeared. The elder who had been announcing the competition suddenly spoke in a loud and grandiose voice, so that everyone in Mercenary City could hear. I declare as of this moment, there is finally a victor to the gathering of the mercenaries. With Jian Chen as the winner, he will also be crowned the king of mercenaries, and will be awarded with the glorious medal of our mercenary city. He will also be awarded with an advanced heaven-tier battle skill and cultivation method. Furthermore, he will also be able to enter the holy grounds to cultivate for half a year. And if his mercenary group is not already A-ranked, then it will be automatically promoted to such a rank. Hearing the announcer's judgment, Ming Dong finally let out a deep breath of joy as Qin Xiao and the others cheered, while Senior and hugged everyone in excitement. The gathering of the mercenaries rewarded the first-place person quite handsomely, and even granted the winner with a medal that represented the honor of being the king of mercenaries. Upon hearing the first-place prize of the gathering of the mercenaries, countless of Heaven Saint Masters had looks of envy on their faces. An advanced Heaven-tier battle skill was infinitesimally close to a Saint-tier battle skill. Not a single one of the Heaven Saint Masters outside of the arena could boast of having an advanced Heaven-tier battle skill. Many of them didn't even have any primary Heaven-tier battle skills. This was because all of the strongest battle skills were in the possession of the few strongest clans. So any Heaven Saint Masters without a background would already find it challenging to find even a primary Heaven-tier battle skill. But right now, an Earth Saint Master kid had somehow managed to claim the #1 spot of the gathering of the mercenaries and obtain a Heaven-tier battle skill. Thus, this made many of the older generation cultivators feel an extreme amount of envy for that battle skill. This advanced tier battle skill was far too easy to obtain. I left my home to travel the continent for 100 years, and the only thing I have to show for it is an advanced Earth tier battle skill. Just when will I get a Heaven tier battle skill? A white-haired elder muttered to himself as he stared at Jian Chen with envy. He too was a Heaven Saint Master. The Holy Lands, that is the legendary place that is said to house even saint rulers. I bet there would be no shortage of the rumored Saint tier battle skills there. But I don't know if that is true or not. Unfortunately, I have never heard or seen any information regarding it in my entire life. Another Heaven Saint Master sighed. Jian Chen and Tsar both walked through the space gate with a brilliant glow as they left. Just as Jian Chen disappeared from the arena, he saw a crane hairstyled elder standing 5 meters away from him with a smile. It looked as if he had already been waiting for him for some time. Dressed in fine silk clothing, the elder stared at Jian Chen with a faint smile. Jian Chen, congratulations on becoming the king of mercenaries. I will take you to reward you with a Heaven-tier battle skill and cultivation method. Please follow me. Then if Senior would lead the way. Jian Chen cupped his hands together and followed the elder toward the armory. On the way, the elder spoke calmly. Jianchen, the biggest reward of being the king of mercenaries is the Holy Land, not the heaven-tier battle skill. The Holy Land is not only a sacred place to our mercenary city, but to the entire Tian Yuan continent. This is where heaven's saint masters yearn to be, and where saint rulers roam about. You must cherish this opportunity, since only saint rulers are allowed entrance. It is only every 50 years that anyone under the rank of a saint ruler can enter, but they must be the king of mercenaries. Chapter 341. Into the armory. Hearing the elder's words, Jianchen grew even more interested in the Holy Land. He wanted to know just what was inside that made every saint ruler crazy for it. Senior, could it be that the Holy Lands contains one of the legendary saint-tier battle skills? Jianchen couldn't help but ask. The elder only replied with, if the Holy Lands only had a saint-tier battle skill, then it was named rashly. There is indeed a saint-tier battle skill within, but that is only one piece of the whole. Don't ask any more about the matter. I won't be able to tell you anymore. The next step of the path was rather silent as Jianchen followed the elder to a small pavilion. It was only 100 meters in circumference and was 10 meters tall. The entire building was made from bamboo and had a few scars on its surface, showing the toll time had done to it over the years. On top of the pavilion doors, a simple board was hung above with the word armory, written in fancy calligraphy. Jianchen looked at the pavilion with some shock. He didn't think that such a small pavilion would be where the armory, with the heaven-tier battle skill, would be stored. There seemed to be no sort of security here. This bamboo must not be an ordinary type of bamboo, for it to not be rotten after so long. If it wasn't, then there would be no way for it to withstand years of rain and wind. Jianchen thought. The elder who had been leading Jianchen to the pavilion suddenly stopped right in front of the door, as he looked at it strangely. This building has existed for countless of years. It was created when the founder of Mercenary City, Mo Tianyan, personally decided to do so. To our mercenary city, this place is a sacred place that is not lesser than the Holy Land. Jianchen immediately felt a sense of veneration for this place, as he looked at the building once more in a new light. This building right in front of him had been personally built by Mo Tianyan, and so there was definitely a special meaning to the building. The years have been ruthless. The elder let out a mournful sigh before going silent. Turning to Jianchen, he spoke. This is where all of the secret manuals are stored. I could only guide you here. The rest will have to rely on you. I thank the senior. Jianchen cupped his hands. Creak! Suddenly, the doors to the pavilion opened on their own, revealing the dim dark light inside. Another voice could be heard from within. Jianchen, hurry up and choose your prize. Also, take off your shoes. It is forbidden for dirt to be tracked into the armory. Hearing the warning, Jianchen was momentarily taken back. He hadn't thought that he would have to take off his shoes in order to enter the armory. Although he found the request to be weird, he did not hesitate, and placed his shoes on the ground outside, before entering the small pavilion. The interior of the armory was exceptionally bright. Not a single speck of dust could be seen on any of the rows of bookshelves. Books weathered with age and simple materials were stacked on each shelves. These shelves themselves were quite mysterious, as there was no wear or damage to them. Each one of the books on the various bookshelves were made from the hide of a magical beast, and each were several inches thick in width with pages. Taking a look around, he quickly came to see a gray-robed elder carefully cleaning one of the many bookshelves diligently, as if each book was a treasure that required an earnest cleaning, so that no dust would remain. Standing quietly behind him, Jianchen spoke no words to the ordinary-looking elder. By his appearance, the elder seemed as if he was incapable of any type of martial arts, but Jianchen knew that he was no ordinary man. With an armory filled with heaven-tier battle skills, there was no way the guardian to this place would be that simple. Almost as if the elder hadn't sensed Jianchen's arrival, he continued to concentrate wholeheartedly on taking each book out from the bookshelf before carefully cleaning each page. As soon as the book was clean, he would put it back and move on to the next book. The elder did not let Jianchen wait for long. The moment he finished the entire bookshelf, the elder turned about and started to walk toward Jianchen. "This one is Jianchen, I greet the senior." Seeing how the elder was turning toward him, Jianchen hastily cupped his hands together. The elder continued to walk forward without looking at Jianchen for a moment before speaking. "The heaven tier battle skill is in the upper levels, follow me." "Yes, senior." Jianchen hurriedly followed the elder. "You'd best be careful and not damage any of the items in here." The elder spoke with a calm expression, but there was an unmistakable amount of power radiating from him. Promptly responding to the elder, Jianchen knew that the entire pavilion was filled with things that this elder was especially fond of. If he were to cause just the slightest amount of damage, then there would be a major headache for him. Jianchen carefully followed behind the elderly man through the pavilion. His footsteps were especially light since he didn't dare step too heavily. Not too long later, Jianchen found himself with the elder on the highest-most level. There was only 4 bookshelves here, but each one differed with the amount of books. Some had a few hundred, some had only a few dozen. Suddenly grabbing a thin book, the elder handed it to Jianchen. "This book has descriptions of both heaven-tier battle skills and heaven-tier cultivation methods. Take a look, and then take your pick." Taking the book from the elder, Jianchen began to flip through the pages. Indeed, what the elder said was correct. The book was a catalog of every single heaven-tier battle skill or cultivation method. This was especially surprising for Jianchen, since he was able to see hundreds of battle skills and cultivation methods. He became tongue-tied when he began to read through the list. A heaven-tier battle skill was a treasure to the current world. Each one was worth an immeasurable amount of money, but in this armory, heaven-tier battle skills were almost as common as rice. If the sheer amount of these battle skills were to be announced to the world, then the entire continent would be shocked. "Senior, with so many heaven-tier battle skills, has no one tried to steal them before?" Jianchen asked suddenly. The elder gave a look of disdain as he heard those words, but he refused to say a word. At this point, Jianchen suddenly realized that he had asked an extremely foolish question. Mercenary City had no one that would covet these battle skills, and at the same time have the ability to steal them. With no more questions, Jianchen began to look for a heaven-tier battle skill and cultivation method. A moment later, Jianchen finally decided on a battle skill and cultivation method. Without any further words, the elder walked to 2 different bookshelves and took out 2 books before handing them to Jianchen. "These are the items you want." Taking the 2 books with quivering hands, Jianchen couldn't believe that the 2 objects that he had just been given were a heaven-tier battle skill and cultivation method. Jianchen had chosen the heaven-tier battle skill called the 9-Cloud Movement. This was a battle skill that anyone could learn, and did not require a specific attribute Saint Force, or any other strict conditions. The 9-Cloud Movement had a total of 9 forms, with each form many times stronger than the one before. It was rumored that the very final form was capable of breaking the heavens and shaking the world. Leaving the armory, Jianchen followed the elder that guided him earlier back to where they had come from. On the way, the elder spoke to him. "The Holy Lands will open in 3 days. By that time, someone will come get you, so it would be best for you not to leave Mercenary City before then." "Yes, senior." Without any further delays, Jianchen and the elder returned to the halls where a single space gate was open for Jianchen to walk through. When he saw this space gate, Jianchen felt a flutter of apprehension in his heart. Could it be that he wasn't in Mercenary City, and was actually within a pocket of space? Without any more hesitation, Jianchen crossed through the space gate, and found himself back within the plaza of Mercenary City. The only difference now was that the large arena was nowhere to be seen, leaving behind a giant flat piece of ground. The multitude of people that had occupied the area before had long since vacated the area, so not many people were in sight. Despite the competition having only been finished 2 hours ago, the announcements for the top 10 had already been announced by a large white banner in the sky with every one of the top 10 combatants' names written in a fancy manner. The number 1 person was Jianchen with Tsar in 2nd place, and Ming Dong in 3rd. "Hey, look, the number 1 person from the gathering of the mercenaries, Jianchen." Suddenly, a youth discovered the existence of Jianchen and cried out in excitement. Hearing the youth shout, everyone in the area suddenly turned around to look at the white-robed Jianchen. Envy, jealousy, and admiration adorned the faces of everyone staring at him, and plenty of pretty, young females didn't bother to hide their eyes of adoration. Jianchen was a handsome person with a handsome face, and so he was definitely a person that could lay claim to a girl's heart with his appearance. Right now, with the glory of being the king of mercenaries along with the recent show of his strength, he had already become the shining white knight for most girls. Chapter 342. The departure of Ming Dong separating from the crowd. Jianchen finally managed to get away from the multitude and return to the very first inn he had rested in. Within the tavern, countless of men were chatting while eating their meals. The topics in every single group revolved around the number one ranker in the gathering of the mercenaries, Jianchen. Who would have thought that Jianchen would seize the first place spot? I've heard he only has a strength around the first or second cycle Earth Saint Master level. For him to beat Tsar, a sixth cycle Earth Saint Master with a Radiant Saint force, it's almost inconceivable. A middle-aged man with a refined look and a well-educated manner spoke. With a single look, the man could be taken to be a scholar. That's right, I didn't expect to see Jianchen defeat Tsar. It cost me 3,000 purple coins. If I had known earlier, then I would have bet on Jianchen. Another dowdy-looking man poured a cup of wine into his mouth, with an indignant face, from the memory of him losing 3,000 purple coins. Haha, young man, you've only lost 3,000 purple coins, so what? Compared to those who have gambled away millions of purple coins, your loss is nothing but a drop in the ocean. The scholar laughed. The four other mercenaries sitting at the table had one of the men give a long sigh. AI, a heaven-tier battle skill. Even if I were to live out my entire life now, I would not be able to find one myself. For Jianchen to be able to obtain one so easily, I am envious of him. Big brother, we were just born in the wrong time. Otherwise, we would have been able to participate in the gathering of the mercenaries as well. You wish. Do you think first place is that easy to obtain? Did you not see those that were far stronger than us participate and be eliminated before they could enter the top 10? Even if we were participants, it would be a miracle for us to enter the top 100. That's right, we aren't all that strong, so it's best not to think about these things. The Tianyuan continent is quite large and has no shortage of geniuses. Each one has been specially trained since young, so their strength should be strong enough to become an Earth Saint Master at a young age. Furthermore, they have access to the most profound battle skills and cultivation methods. Did you not see that Ming Dong? He was already able to use an advanced heaven-tier battle skill at his young age, and yet he was still only third place. I'm sure that first place Jianchen is strong enough to even fight against Heaven Saint Masters. From the chatter of everyone around, the majority of the people were envious and full of admiration for Jianchen. But then, a sharp-eyed fellow had noticed Jianchen walking in before crying out in surprise. Everyone look! Isn't that the winner of the competition, Jianchen? Upon hearing his voice, everyone immediately stopped eating and swung their heads to look at where the man had pointed. Each one looked on in shock at the white-robed Jianchen. Within the previously loud inn, no one dared to make a sound. Jianchen ignored all the gazes on him, since he had no interest in any one of them. With that, Jianchen left for the upper levels of the inn. The moment Jianchen disappeared, everyone in the inn immediately exploded with chatter. Jianchen's in this inn? Do you think he's renting a room here? Jianchen looks even younger than I thought. With one look, I could tell he is from a large family with a strong potential. Not only is he young and promising, but he is quite handsome too. At such a young age, Jianchen was able to defeat the 6th cycle Earth Saint Master Tsar. His potential is truly unlimited. The heaven-tier battle skill and cultivation method Jianchen won from the gathering of the mercenaries surely has to be on him right now. How envious. Pay attention to what you say so you don't get in trouble for it. Do you not have a filter on what words you speak out loud? A few of the inn residents continued to talk among each other. Even the busy waitresses hurriedly spoke to each other. Hurry up and report to the shopkeeper. The king of mercenaries, Jianchen is in our inn. This is a great event. Arriving at the second floor of the inn, Jianchen immediately walked to where Qin Zhao's room was. They had already prepared a private room, where all sorts of exotic delicacies were prepared for him, to congratulate him on his win. Seated at the dinner table already was Du Gufeng, Tian Muling, Qin Ji, Yin Zheng Sr. and Ming Dong, Qin Xiao, Qin Ju and several others. Aside from them, the grand elder of the Tianqing clan could be seen waiting with a smile. Among all the people Jianchen was familiar with, all of them except Huang Wan had gathered here. At the dinner table, everyone congratulated Jianchen on his win. Even the grand elder of the Tianqing clan had changed his attitude toward Jianchen to a more respectable status. Even Qin Ji and Tian Muling were given respect from him. That was also because the three outsiders of the Tianqing clan, Du Gufeng, Qin Ji, and Tian Muling, were all from three different factions with even more strength than what the Tianqing clan could afford to provoke. Qin Ji especially had a very extraordinary identity. After the meal, when everyone had left, Jianchen and Ming Dong both returned to Jianchen's room, where Ming Dong spoke. In 2 days, Uncle Tian and I will go bring my father and mother here, so I will be gone for some time. That is no problem, be at ease. In 3 days, I will be leaving to enter the Holy Land for half a year. Jianchen laughed as he waved his hand in a casual manner. Sitting by Jianchen's side, Ming Dong asked, Jianchen, I've known you for quite some time, but I don't know where your family is. Did you wish for me to bring some news to them? Jianchen's expression immediately grew conflicted. Some thoughts hidden away in his brain were brought out by this question. I've left my home for a good amount of time by now, but I don't know whether or not my mother is faring well. There is also my elder brother Changyang, who and second sister Changyang Mingyue, who have both cared for me always. Changyang Mingyue surely must have married by now. What a shame that I wasn't able to attend the ceremony. Jianchen thought dejectedly. At this thought, he had suddenly realized just how much he desired to return home and see his family once more. It had been far too long since he had left his home. Seeing the dejected Jianchen, Ming Dong had an indescribable look in his eye. From Jianchen's expression, he could see that something was weighing down on him. Placing a hand on Jianchen's shoulder, Ming Dong spoke lightly. Jianchen, what's wrong? If there's any trouble, go ahead and tell me. I, Ming Dong, will definitely find a way to help you. If I can't, then I will definitely ask Uncle Tian to. Ming Dong's words had shaken Jianchen awake from his thoughts. Shaking his head, Jianchen replied, No, there's nothing. I'm just remembering some old memories, that's all. Jianchen needed power to deal with the Huayin sect. Although he knew that asking Ming Dong and Uncle Tian for help would easily resolve the matter, and probably touch upon the crisis Jesson Kingdom was currently facing as well, Jianchen did not wish to go about this route. The Huayin sect had forced him to run away from his home when he was only 15 years old. To Jianchen, this had carved an unforgettable amount of hatred for them into him. Jianchen desired to finish this affair with his own power. He did not want any outside power to help him with his revenge. With a mental sigh, Jianchen took the heaven-stolen fortune out from his space ring and said, Ming Dong, your house isn't that far away from the Jesson Kingdom, so I hope that during your return trip, you could hand this over to Changyang Ba of the Changyang clan in Lore City. Originally, Jianchen planned on giving the advanced Heaven Tier Battle Skill 9 Cloud Movement to Ming Dong to give to the Changyang clan, but after some thought, he decided to instead give them the Heaven-Stolen Fortune. This was because a Heaven Tier Battle Skill was far too precious. He was afraid that if news were to spread that an advanced Heaven Tier Battle Skill was at the Changyang clan, there would be trouble. While the Changyang clan was not weak, they weren't strong enough to protect 2 Heaven Tier Battle Skills, especially since one of them was an advanced Heaven Tier Battle Skill. So, Jianchen finally decided to let Ming Dong bring the Heaven-Stolen Fortune back with him, because of the special characteristic of the battle skill. When activated, no person would be able to tell that it was a Heaven Tier Battle Skill. This was a battle skill that directly increased one's strength. It was hard to tell that it was anything special, as it could conceal itself very well, unlike other Heaven Tier Battle Skills. which would display astounding power as soon as they were activated. Ming Dong took the heaven-stolen fortune with a serious look as he spoke. "Don't worry, Jianchen. I'll definitely bring this back to Changyang Ba of the Changyang clan. Remember, you must keep that this is a heaven-tier battle skill a secret." Ming Dong's departure was sudden. By the second day, he had left Mercenary City with a respectful farewell. At the same time, Qin Shao, Qin Zhu, and the other Tianqing clansmen followed the Grand Elder out of Mercenary City. Although they didn't wait for Tianzhou, the Grand Elder had concluded that Tianzhou must have met an unexpected situation, and with only a sad sigh, he said no more about the matter. He knew that gathering tokens within the isolated space was the goal, and even if he found out that Tianzhou had been killed by someone, he would not be able to find them. Even De Gufeng had said farewell to Jianchen as he took the ruler armament along with some other elders out of Mercenary City, leaving only Jianchen behind. Because Jianchen would be residing within the Holy Land for half the year, he had already dispatched Senior En and Yunzheng on a mission for the Flame Mercenaries. They were to go to the Jessen Kingdom and ensure that the Changyang clan would be given assistance. Although the distance from here to the Jessen Kingdom was quite large, this would not be a problem for the two. Chapter 343. The Matchless Heavenly Enchantress. By now, the inn that Jianchen was residing in had a long red banner waving overhead. Written on it in fancy calligraphy was a single line of words, not only congratulating Jianchen for becoming the king of mercenaries, but it also notified everyone this inn was the inn he was staying at. Not only did it praise Jianchen, but it also served to be an advertisement for the inn, improving its reputation. The owner of the inn had valiantly waived all of Jianchen's expense and treated him as if he were the king of a nation. This type of respect was completely new to Jianchen, and many times he thought that he had swapped lives with someone else. The gathering of the mercenaries was coming to a close, making the topic of Jianchen, being the king of mercenaries, an extremely popular one. Since the owner of the inn proudly stated who was staying at his inn, the entire mercenary city had learned that Jianchen was currently residing at the Take a Smell Inn. Many people began to draw close in hopes of observing Jianchen, or with some other goal in mind. Therefore, many of them had reserved a room in the inn to stay close by. In short, the shrewd owner of the inn had transformed his inn into an almost legendary one within Mercenary City. With his identity and his place of residence revealed, Jianchen encountered many people arriving at his room, offering all sorts of invitations. In the end, Jianchen couldn't help it anymore and barred his room shut. At the same time, he notified the owner that he required a few days to cultivate and did not want to be bothered. He forbid anyone from disturbing him, else he would move ins. The owner of the inn had been terrified by Jianchen's words. It was with great difficulty that he managed to have such a deity stay at his inn. How could he let Jianchen leave so easily? With that, he immediately agreed to Jianchen's request and had some of the hired hands blockade the entire area for Jianchen so that no one would be able to enter. Even a Heaven Saint Master was forbidden access. After all, this was Mercenary City, meaning not a single person would dare retaliate. Within the confines of his own room, Jianchen poured all his efforts into understanding the illusionary flash. Although he had already grasped the basics of it, he hadn't mastered the introductory steps. The illusionary flash was exceptionally profound and was even more complex to understand than the heaven-stolen fortune. After a few days, Jianchen had made very little progress, but with his speed he still managed to make a significant advancement. As Jianchen's comprehension of the illusionary flash grew deeper and deeper, he began to feel that if he were to truly master the battle skill, then he would be able to flash forward large distances at a terrifying speed. 3 days passed by quickly. A member of the Mercenary City ruling party came forward to find Jianchen before respectfully asking him to come out. Jianchen followed the youth to a plaza near a palace-like building, where he met another resolute-looking middle-aged man waiting for him. "Honored Jianchen, I, Elder Feng, have been commanded to guide you. Please follow me." The middle-aged man spoke respectfully as he led Jianchen to a space gate. "Honored Jianchen, You must travel through this space gate to get to the other side. The elder is waiting for you. The man spoke. With a word of thanks, Jianchen stepped through the space gate. Jianchen already had a good understanding of Mercenary City, so when he heard that he needed to travel through a space gate, he no longer found it strange, since he was used to it already. With a flash of light, Jianchen arrived on the other side of the space gate, where a garden filled with sweet-smelling flowers could be seen. 50 meters ahead, 2 white-robed elders were sitting there playing chess. Jianchen recognized both of the elders. One of them was the elder who had provided all of the tokens at first, and had been the referee for the finals. The other member was the elder who had been cleaning the armory. Taking a look around, Jianchen realized that he was standing in an ocean of flowers, where countless of butterflies could be seen floating around. The place seemed as if it was a rare paradise on Earth. Aside from the 2 elders, there was no one else around. Jianchen had no idea what he should be doing, so he walked toward the elders slowly with light steps. Finally arriving close to the chess-playing elders, Jianchen waited patiently for them to finish without a word. The 2 elders had serene looks on their faces, as they concentrated completely on the chess game, while completely ignoring Jianchen's existence. After waiting for almost 2 hours, the 2 elders finally finished their game, with helpless expressions. So it was a draw again. Elder Hui, it seems that even after deciding on a chess game, a decision was still not easily made. The elder who had been in the armory laughed, as he began to place the chess pieces back in a box. The one called Elder Hui had a bitter smile on his face as well. That's right. While we don't have much to decide between when it comes to winning or losing, it is still a tough choice. Quickly, the 2 elders cleaned up the area before standing up. The elder who had been in the armory cleaning looked up at the sky. It's about time for us to go. Elder Hui nodded his head. Then let us be on our way, youngster, follow us. He directed his final words toward Jianchen. Yes, senior. Jianchen hurriedly cupped his hands in response. The 2 elders had to be peak heaven saint masters at the very least, especially the elder who had been a referee. Many times Jianchen had fleeting thoughts that he was a saint ruler. To such a person, Jianchen was but only a small dragonfly. Hearing Jianchen call him senior, Elder Hui laughed. Youngster, you are called Jianchen, correct? You may call me the 13th elder. As for the other elder, you may call him the 8th elder. There is no need to call us seniors. Yes, elders. Jianchen cupped his hands hastily. At the same time, he had been shocked to hear that there was at least 18 elders within Mercenary City. Following the 2 elders through the flowery world, Jianchen finally arrived at another large space gate several kilometers down the road. At that moment, Jianchen found himself in a desolate area, where a large sacrificial platform could be seen with thousands of memorial tablets. By the platform, there were already 8 people who were staring absent-mindedly at the tablets. From the 8 men, there was a single middle-aged man, a 40-year-old woman, an elder who looked to be a 70 or 80-year-old grandmother, and the rest were all quite elderly themselves. It was as if the 8 people had returned to their original state, where their presence had been held back. Each one looked quite ordinary, and did not have a single characteristic of being unique in any way. These 8 are the elders of Mercenary City, each one of them holding a decisive amount of power. The 8th elder spoke. Growing serious, Jianchen took a look at each one of them to confirm their identities. The way to the Holy Land will open in an hour, wait for now. Aside from us elders, there are still a few men from Mercenary City that haven't arrived yet. The 13th elder spoke as he and the 8th elder both walked toward the platform where the memorial tablets were. Without a word, Jianchen followed behind with a strange look at the memorial tablets and a curious mind. At this moment, a sound could be heard from a long distance away as a cyan-robed woman with a zither could be seen flying rapidly toward Jianchen and the rest. The woman was quite tall, and her hair shined on her cotton robes. Her clear and bright eyes could be seen shining in a way, as if they could steal souls. Her fingers gently and tenderly caressed the strings of her zither. With each step, her slim waist swayed to the side gently. Although her appearance was not yet clear to see, the light radiating from her could only indicate that she was a matchless beauty that could cause nations to fall at the blink of an eye. The woman gently walked toward the elders from Mercenary City. This woman has come to greet everyone. The woman's voice was extremely charming and bewitching, almost as if it was the music from the ninth heaven instead of being from the secular world. Hearing the woman speak, Jianchen instantly grew muddled in the head. He had never heard such a beautiful voice before. It was an unspeakable sensation that shouldn't exist in this world. Hearing the voice, the other elders slowly turned around before cupping their hands with a smile. It has been 50 years, but the heavenly enchantress still remains as beautiful as ever. One of the elders said. The cyan-robed woman smiled. 15th elder is too kind. Heavenly enchantress, it has been 50 years. You look even more beautiful than before. The middle-aged woman spoke as she looked at her with a breathtaking eye. Haha, the matchless saint of the zither, the heavenly enchantress. A beauty that would bring the moon to shame and can captivate even the birds and beasts. The fairy of the Tianyuan continent with beautiful grace. With one word, hundreds of flowers grow ashamed of themselves. One of the elders laughed. Hearing this, the other men had small smiles on their faces as they too began to praise her. Heavenly enchantress? Saint of the zither? Could it be that this woman is the very same heavenly enchantress spoken of by the second miss of the Tianqing clan? Jianchen thought with shock as he looked at the stunning woman, with a great wave of emotions running through his heart. Chapter 344. Entering the Holy Land. Judging from the news given to Jianchen from the second miss of the Tianqing clan, the heavenly enchantress was a legendary figure on the Tianyuan continent. She was capable of causing a nation to fall with her beauty that was deemed extremely unique. Her ability with the zither was peerless, and possessed the zither of the demonic cry that could bring any other expert of the zither to shame with her songs. Even her opponents would be entranced by the melodic songs and would have their souls erased before their bodies would follow suit. Aside from that, the heavenly enchantress had prevented a war between two countries with a single ballad over the battlefield, causing the 100,000 soldiers on both sides to fall asleep for 3 days and 3 nights. A truly fearful feat. The heavenly enchantress had become a saint a long time ago, as well as being a saint ruler. A person like this was already standing at the top of the continent and overlooked the others. What Jianchen hadn't imagined was that he would be able to see the once-in-a-generation saint ruler, the heavenly enchantress. This was something that had moved Jianchen's emotions. After all, a saint ruler was right in front of him. Even more than that, but this woman was a living legend. The heavenly enchantress had her facial features hidden, but it did nothing to hide the outline in her body. Not only was she quite tall, but her beautiful body was indescribable. One could choke from her beauty, as it seemed as if she was not meant for this world. And even Jianchen had found it hard to move his eyes away from her the moment he locked onto her, as if she was the only person in the world. The surrounding world seemed to have lost its color, while she was the only focal point left. Then, the heavenly enchantress had discovered Jianchen's gaze, and turned to look at him with a surprised look on her face as she spoke with a heavenly voice. Elders, this must be the king of mercenaries, correct? The 8 elder laughed. The heavenly enchantress guesses correctly. He is called Jianchen, and is our king of mercenaries. Although he is only a first cycle Earth Saint Master, his fighting strength is not weak at all. Nodding her head, the heavenly enchantress spoke no more, as if she lost her interest in him. Switching her gaze over to the memorial tablets, her eyes suddenly grew distracted. Seeing just how the elders were speaking to the heavenly enchantress, as if they were her equal, Jianchen was astonished. He couldn't help but think to the words the 13th elder had said. The Holy Land was a place that only saint rulers could enter, and if one who was not a saint ruler wanted to enter, then they would have to be the king of mercenaries. Then does this mean these elders here are all saint rulers at the very least? Even the 113th elder who had been in the armory is a saint ruler too then. Jianchen thought to himself in shock. For there to be 10 saint rulers, Mercenary City was far too strong to believe then. Afterwards, the elders came up one after another to introduce themselves to Jianchen. As Jianchen grew to understand their identities, He realized that aside from the first two elders, the rest were all affiliated with other powers, but had a friendly relation with Mercenary City. Right now, aside from Jian Chun, there was 26 people of both genders. The vast majority of the people there were past the age of 70, but there were still a few 40-years-old men. Yet, the person with the most attention was the Heavenly Enchantress, who stood within a group of people that made her seem as if she was the crane amongst the chickens. Right now, there was still one more hour remaining when another person had flown through the air and joined with everyone else. This person was a youth who wore an expensive-looking white robe. His age was about 20 years old. He was also extraordinarily handsome on a scale far different than Jianshan. However, while he was handsome, his face had a slight feminine aspect to it while Jianshan had a masculine expression. The youth had a smiling expression that emitted light as he walked towards the Heavenly Enchantress and cupped his hands together. Heavenly Enchantress, it has been 50 years, yet you've grown even more beautiful than before. The youth spoke as if infatuated with eyes that did nothing to show his adoration for her. The Heavenly Enchantress' eyes narrowed as a look of disgust could be seen. Not even looking at the youth, she spoke. I thank Bijian Wang for his compliments. As if ignoring the attitude the Heavenly Enchantress was showing towards himself, the youth walked towards the Heavenly Enchantress with an infatuated expression towards her as he spoke once more. Heavenly Enchantress, we've known each other for 200 years by now. When will you invite me to your 3 sacred isles for a tour? I've heard that the 3 sacred isles is a paradise on earth without any strife, and only a group of harmonious fishermen. This place has long since distanced itself with war as well. I've long since awaited for such a place. I, Bijian, have not fought for so long for such a reason. Each one of the elders looked on at this conversation with a helpless face. They all knew that Bijian had admired the Heavenly Enchantress. Back when Bijian had been a middle-aged man, when he had came across the Heavenly Enchantress, it had been love at first sight. Using a secret method, he had managed to rejuvenate his face back to his youth, so that he could win her affection. Unfortunately for the love-starved wolf, the Heavenly Enchantress had ignored Bijian's enthusiastic attempts in trying to win her love. As time went on, however, she had eventually came to loathe him. My apologies, Bijian Wang. My 3 sacred isles is accepting no one. Her voice was as cold as ice now. As if encouraged, Bijian Wang had an innocent look on his face. Heavenly Enchantress, could it be that even I am an outsider too? Naturally, spoke the Heavenly Enchantress, without taking a second to think while simultaneously giving no face. Seeing the icy cold attitude of the Heavenly Enchantress, Bijian Wang had a helpless look on his face as he faced the skies and sighed. Afterwards, he walked by the Heavenly Enchantress' side without another sound. In his pursuit of her, even after so long without success, he did not give up. At that moment, the space on the platform suddenly began to tremble, as a large amount of energy could felt gathering slowly within. The time has come, the Holy Land is about to open. An elder of Mercenary City spoke. Everyone's gaze was sucked towards the space, where the energy inside was growing richer and richer in density, as well as intensity. At last, the space suddenly seemed as if it was starting to distort. A few moments later, the large amount of energy already gathered there had reached a limit, causing the space to rip apart to reveal a 3 feet wide door, made of chaotic space that could not be seen through. The gate to the Holy Land has opened. Everyone please walk in. An elder of Mercenary City spoke with a respectful tone, before walking slowly towards the gate, and then disappearing into the chaos. Suddenly, the other elders of Mercenary City bowed towards the gate to the Holy Land, before disappearing inside. When all of the elders from Mercenary City had entered through the gate, the saint rulers from outside the city bowed respectfully at the gate, before walking through it as well. Jian Chun was the last one to enter, although he had no idea why everyone had bowed at the gate before entering. But he too followed suit, and gave a bow to the gate, before stepping into the chaotic gate to the Holy Land. Just as Jian Chun had reappeared, he had found himself standing on a bright ray of light. The atmosphere in this area was far different than before, as it felt as if it was rather moist. Taking a look around, Jianchen was startled to find out there was no sky to be seen in this area. The entire area 100 meters above was a single slab of stone that extended as far as he could see, as if it was scooped from the stomach of a mountain. And right in the middle of the ceiling, a single crystal could be seen overhead with a dim light that seemed to fluctuate with energy. The eighth elder walked up to Jianchen's side, prompting Jianchen to ask in wonder, "Eighth elder, is this the Holy Land?" The eighth elder nodded his head. "That's correct, this is the Holy Land. I am sure that you can see that we are within the stomach of a mountain. The Holy Land is indeed here." The founder of Mercenary City, Mo Tianyan himself, had created a single space within the city as a way to reach the Holy Land. That would come to be known as the Gate to the Holy Land, and aside from that method, there is no alternative route to get here. Jianchen took a look at the Holy Land. He had no idea that Mo Tianyan would somehow be connected to the Holy Land. Just then, the eighth elder looked at the floating crystal suspended overhead and slowly raised his hand, as if he was being attracted by a sudden force of attraction. Slowly, the crystal began to slowly float towards the elder's hand before finally making contact with it. Observing the item, Jianchen could see that it was a conical-shaped crystal around the size of a thumb, and yet sparkled with a bright light from its transparent body. The energy that flowed from it was remarkably pure, as if the entire crystal itself was completely pure, without a single taint. "Eighth elder, just what is this object?" Jianchen couldn't help but ask curiously. Chapter 345. Cultivation in the Holy Land. This item is something that is produced within the Holy Land. Every 50 years, another one of these will be made. This is something we call Mercenary's Heart, and is given to every single king of mercenaries in secret every 50 years. The eighth elder explained. The Mercenary's Heart is made of the special energy condensed within the Holy Land. If it is absorbed, then not only will one's strength be increased rapidly, but it will also increase one's spirit. As long as one is not a saint ruler, then their strength will achieve a great amount of progress and improvement. Handing over the Mercenary's Heart to Jianchen's hand, the eighth elder spoke. "Take this and swallow it before you go off somewhere and refine it. You will see that you will make an extreme amount of progress." "Yes, eighth elder." Jianchen had no hesitation as he immediately placed the Mercenary's Heart into his mouth and swallowed. Bear in mind, the Mercenary's Heart must be refined within the Holy Land. If it is taken out of the Holy Land, then the energy gathered within the Mercenary's Heart will quickly evaporate. The eighth elder warned Jianchen. "This one understands. I thank the eighth elder for his warning." Jianchen cupped his hands in thanks as his heart was still reeling with shock. This Mercenary's Heart was far too strange, if it couldn't be taken outside, and was completely useless for a saint ruler. But the strangeness wasn't all too bad. It was still given freely as a reward to every king of mercenaries, which was coincidentally the only non-saint ruler qualified to enter the Holy Land. The Holy Land has a total of 4 areas. In the first area, the time flow goes 10 times faster than the outside world. 10 months and there is 1 month in the outside world. If you wish to try to refine your saint force, or try to comprehend any heaven tier battle skill, the first area is your best choice. The second area is best for understanding the 6 elements of the world. In that area, one could accomplish twice the work for half the effort, making improvements to one's strength quite rapid and effective. The third and fourth area is where the best part of the Holy Land are. The Holy Land's most precious items can be found there, such as saint tier battle skills, and even techniques of a senior generation that is comparable to a saint tier battle skill. Those not of the saint ruler realm will find it hard to comprehend, and thus is useless to you. The fourth area is where we elders of Mercenary City have left behind all that we have learned and realized over our years. To you, they are useless because you have no hopes in even coming in contact with it, let alone being able to comprehend the absolute profoundness of them. Thus, the area that suits you best is the first area. You should cultivate there for half a year. It'll be the same as if cultivating for 5 years in the outside world. The eighth elder explained to Jianchen. He had been the announcer for the gathering of the mercenaries, so explanations had been something he was in charge of. He had a responsibility to explain matters regarding the Holy Land clearly, and did not treat Jianchen with any special consideration. After he had finished talking, the eighth elder left Jianchen's line of sight, leaving him the only person around. Taking an observation of the place around himself, Jianchen had noticed that the other 20 elders had already disappeared from sight, so that he was the last person here. Not wanting to squander any of his precious time, he heeded the eighth elder's words, and began to travel for the first area, so that he could begin refining the mercenary's heart. The very moment that Jianchen had entered the first area, Jianchen felt that the space within this place was completely abnormal, that made his body feel quite unsuited for, as if the area was objecting to Jianchen's presence. This must be the first area where time goes 10 times as fast. Jianchen thought to himself as his feet continued onwards, and took him to the abyss where he could feel the energy density grow even heavier. As soon as Jianchen had reached the deepest parts of this place, he took a look around only to see a cyan-robed person sitting 50 meters away. It was the heavenly enchantress. Standing from afar, Jianchen couldn't help but look at her back, which concealed not a single part of her stunning body. With only a smallest amount of hesitation, Jianchen slowly walked towards the heavenly enchantress. As he drew 30 meters closer, Jianchen suddenly felt the energy in the area suddenly grow richer, as it pulled towards the heavenly enchantress body. The speed in which it was being pulled increased, and without any explanations, Jianchen knew that the area the heavenly enchantress was in was the core of the first area. Jianchen stopped 10 meters away from her before sitting down. While he knew that the closer he got to where the heavenly enchantress was, the richer the energy would be, but at the same time, he did not dare to get too close to her. Senior, the Holy Land's Saint-tier battle skill, and other cultivational insights left behind by our predecessors. Why haven't you gone to find them? Jianchen asked the heavenly enchantress with confusion. With so many saint rulers here, a saint-tier battle skill, and the insights from those of generations past was an undeniable treasure. But the heavenly enchantress had decided to come to this first area to refine her saint force, unlike the others. But the heavenly enchantress continued to sit down with her eyes closed as if she hadn't heard Jianchen at all. After half a day of waiting without a response, Jianchen had figured that an expert of the saint ruler would be extremely arrogant, and would not even stoop down to a level where they would waste words with an earth saint master. Without bothering to ask any more questions, Jianchen immediately closed his eyes, and began to refine the mercenary's heart. I follow the path of the zither and use sound to fight. My road is different from the others. Their battle skills and insights are unsuitable for me, and provide no help. Just as Jianchen had closed his eyes, the voice of the heavenly enchantress could be heard ringing in the air like the sounds of the song of heaven. Flashing open his eyes, Jianchen realized that the heavenly enchantress had still not yet moved from her spot, but a cyan-colored mist had blocked his line of sight. Without even waiting for a response from Jianchen, the heavenly enchantress continued to speak. So you are the king of mercenaries. I am sure you have already obtained the mercenary's heart. It is a rare treasure that will surely bring about a great deal of change to your strength with fragments of the profound mysteries of the world inside it. The heavenly enchantress spoke with her eyes closed. I thank Senior for her words. Jianchen cupped his hands together. There is no need to call me Senior, just call me Heavenly Enchantress. She spoke without the initial coldness from before. Afterwards, the Heavenly Enchantress spoke no more even after Jianchen had asked several questions. With a dejected look, Jianchen began to refine the mercenary's heart once more. The mercenary's heart was extremely magical. Absorbing and refining the energy within it was fast enough for his speed and spirit to make leaps and bounds. Almost as if the mercenary's heart was hiding some sort of strange energy that Jianchen could use to blend into his own body and strengthen him. Furthermore, there were even some of the fragments that the heavenly enchantress had spoken about. With 1 month inside the Holy Land being equal to 10 months in the outside world, Jianchen had already spent 2 months inside before the mercenary's heart was finally refined. His strength by that point had made an extreme change, bringing him up to the third cycle Earth Saint Master realm, and was already on the verge of making the breakthrough to the fourth cycle. After this increment of strength, Jianchen's spirit had also made a significant change. Compared to before, his spirit was 3 times as big as before, a drastic change that had made Jianchen unbelievably happy. And once the mercenary's heart had been absorbed, Jianchen's mind had many different slivers of mysterious rays of light that were hard to grab hold of. These rays of light were seemingly the profound mysteries of the world, yet at the same time, they were also something different, causing Jianchen to feel confused. Although Jianchen could understand that these were the fragments that the heavenly enchantress had talked about, he still couldn't fully understand it. It could be said that he had a mysterious treasure, but was unable to find the key to unlock it and comprehend the secrets within. 2 months later, Jianchen had opened his eyes once more only to see the heavenly enchantress still in the same place with her eyes closed as well. Standing up, Jianchen had completely refined the mercenary heart and had now wanted to take a look at the other 3 areas. Leaving without a sound, Jianchen had arrived at the second area, which had 6 different caves. Each cave was different and had 6 different types of elements: light, dark, fire, earth, water, and wind. Deciding upon the light attribute cave, Jianchen saw that the inside of the cave was extraordinarily bright, giving a sensation of dryness. It was almost as if the sunlight had been intensified within this cave, but unlike the normal rays of light, the light here was giving him a painful sensation, almost as if the light was trying to kill him. Within the light-filled cave, Jianchen could feel an abundance of radiant saint force. Radiant Saint Masters were majestic within the Tianyuan continent, since they could use the Radiant Saint force to heal the injuries of others. Some of the stronger Radiant Saint Masters could even bring a person back to life and violate the natural order of the heavens. This type of Radiant Saint Master would be by no means a weak individual. On the other hand were the Radiant Warriors, who were given the nicknames of being undying. Radiant Warriors were filled with Radiant Saint force and were exceedingly rare. Although they could control the Radiant Saint force, they followed the way of the hegemon, which contrasted against the Radiant Saint Master's way of the king. They could only heal themselves and could not heal anyone else. Radiant Warriors were also able to use their Radiant Saint force to harm others as an attack. If used on their own bodies, it would heal them, but if used on someone else, it would cause damage instead. Thus, in terms of healing, they were not equal to a Radiant Saint Master. As for the light attribute cave, Jianchen could feel both the soft rays of Radiant Saint force, as well as the hard tyrannical ray of Radiant Saint force. So with the harsh rays of light stabbing into his body, Jianchen would naturally feel a sharp stabbing sensation. Not only could light help men, but it could also kill them. Chapter 346. Saint Tier Battle Skill. Jianchen was a Radiant Saint Master, and not a Radiant Warrior in that regard. A Radiant Saint Master succeeded in using their spirit to augment and strengthen their control over the Radiant Saint force in the world to heal those that needed it. A Radiant Warrior cultivated like any other cultivator in order to fight and improve their own strength. Spirit was secondary to them, since it was absolutely unrelated to improving their strength. Thus, the light attribute cave would not be extremely effective for him, since he wasn't a light attributed cultivator. A Radiant Saint Master and Radiant Warrior had only a slight difference in name, but they walked 2 different paths of cultivation. One focused on the spirit, and the other focused on Saint force. He quickly left the light attributed cave. Jianchen knew that the light attributed element inside was meant for people to comprehend, but it would not serve him any use. Not only that, but he couldn't handle the painful stinging sensation. Afterward, Jianchen visited the other caves. Aside from some small increase in his understanding, since his inner saint force had no attribute, he felt no connection to any of the caves. Quickly, Jianchen arrived at the third area, which was a single huge mountain wall. There were 8 abnormally large caverns positioned on the cave walls. While most of the caves were located very high up on the wall, The lowest cave was only 30 meters high. The highest one was over 100 meters up, reaching almost to the top of the cave. The entire wall was as smooth as a shiny mirror with no footholds, meaning that those without strength would find it impossible to climb. Above the entrances to these caverns were a few words. The very first cavern had the words, Second Heavenly Layer St. King Yunyang Wudi's Remnants. The top 3 caves had the words, Ninth Heavenly Layer St. King Tian Qinyu's Remnants. Ninth Heavenly Layer St. King Shui Wuya's Remnants. Ninth Heavenly Layer St. King Lungxi Xiexuan. Jian Chen's eyes swept across the caves with awestruck fascination. These 8 caves all held the remnants of Saint Kings. The topmost 3 caves had even housed Saint Kings at the 9th heavenly layer. Could it be that all of these Saint Kings were from Mercenary City? Jianchen muttered. It was only now that he realized the power he had seen in Mercenary City was the tip of the iceberg. Mercenary City towered over the Tianyuan continent for countless of years as the pinnacle city. Not only did they have several Saint Ruler experts, but they also had some Saint King overseers. This type of colossal power was akin to a ferocious war beast that no one had the possibility of killing. Suddenly, Jianchen couldn't help but think back to when he was in that isolated space collecting tokens for the competition. When he had been in the shrine, Ming Dong's uncle Tian had been a Saint Ruler 5,000 years ago. Could it be possible for him to have made a breakthrough to become a Saint King after so long? Or maybe even a Saint Emperor? Since he had been residing within the isolated space along with the place used for the competition, could he too be a member of Mercenary City? Sucking in a deep breath, he slowly started to try and calm himself down. With a single leap, he landed within the lowest cavern. The passageway within the cavern was quite long and curvaceous. After walking about 300 meters, Jianchen finally arrived at a dead end, which was a single spacious cave around 50 meters in width. There wasn't any sources of light, but what should have been a dark cave somehow was bright, similar to the light outside. But the source of this light could not be found, giving this cave another sense of mystery. All around the cave were various paintings of men. Each painting was almost lifelike, and in each painting, the person drawn within seemed to be performing some sort of graceful movement. Within the center of the cave, 3 men were sitting idly, while staring at the paintings with a stiffness similar to that of a statue. Not a single hair could be seen moving, and within the 3 of them, Jianchen recognized the 13th elder. Could it be this painting portrays one of the legendary Saint Tier battle skills? Jianchen thought. Walking toward the 3 men, he followed suit and began to stare fixedly at the painting. But after half a day, he had failed to understand anything from the painting. Jianchen, how did you come to be here? Did the 8th elder not tell you to stay at the first area to cultivate? Suddenly, Jianchen could hear the wizened voice of the 13th elder who spoke with shock. 13th elder, I was only taking a look around. I heard from the 8th elder that the 3rd area had a Saint Tier battle skill. Could this painting be it? Jianchen asked. Since he was afraid of disturbing the other 2 men, Jianchen spoke in a quiet voice. Correct, this is indeed a Saint Tier battle skill. Since you are here, I presume that you have seen the other caverns. This is one of the riches of Mercenary City. In total, there are 8 Saint Tier battle skills, the equivalent to the 8 senior elders of Mercenary City. Each one of them reached the Saint King realm, and these Saint Tier battle skills were created by them. The 13th elder spoke. 13th elder, with these paintings all depicting a Saint Tier battle skill, I don't see anything for cultivation methods. Just why is that? Jianchen asked with confusion. A Saint Tier battle skill is different from a Heaven Tier battle skill. There are no cultivation methods. Each advancement from this point on is dependent on oneself. The use of a Saint Tier battle skill is to draw upon the energy of the world. So to comprehend and understand a Saint Tier battle skill, one must be a Saint Ruler at the very least. That is because once one makes the breakthrough to become a Saint Ruler, they will begin to understand the profound mysteries of the world and grasp the energy of the world. Jianchen, a Saint Tier battle skill isn't something that you can understand right now. You are merely wasting your time here. Hurry on back to the first area and cultivate. You are the king of mercenaries for this time's gathering of the mercenaries. Wait until you become a saint ruler, and come back for the next gathering of the mercenaries, to enter the Holy Land once again. The 13th elder spoke. I thanked the 13th elder for his kind intentions. I had only wished to see this saint-tier battle skill, and even though I was unable to understand it, I was still able to further my insights. Jianchen smiled. It is up to you. You only have half a year's time. I hope you treasure it wisely. The elder said before turning away. Jianchen kept calm, and looked back toward the first painting. Now that he knew that these paintings were saint-tier battle skills, his attitude toward them changed completely. He no longer looked at them with a simple gaze, and instead began to look at them intently, so that not even the expressions were neglected. As he looked at each and every movement within the diagrams, Jianchen would occasionally feel a small revelation appear within his mind. It was as if he were on the verge of understanding something, but was unable to grasp the final step, and grew confused once more. Seeing just how each one of these movements and forms had some sort of secret, Jianchen was unable to completely understand just what was the purpose, leaving him quite vexed. With each observation, Jianchen could feel his thoughts grow more and more chaotic as he felt his mind expand. It was almost as if his head had become a constantly expanding balloon, and since he couldn't bear the air expanding within, his head was hurting badly. Jianchen knew that this saint-tier battle skill was the cause. Therefore he immediately turned away and sat on the ground. He tried to think of nothing, emptying his mind of everything as he fell into a deep meditation. After an unknown amount of time, Jianchen had finally regained control of his mind, allowing him to open his eyes and stare at the painting once more. Now Jianchen had a better understanding of the first painting. Slowly, he could understand that the people within the painting were like the heavens. They were representatives of the world. Their movements were fused together with the world. Each move contained a profound mystery of the world, and each strike contained a profound theory. But that was something Jianchen didn't understand. However, when Jianchen had understood the first part, he could suddenly feel that this one strike displayed on the picture was quite simple, and he could work it out. In one moment, he could feel that this move embodied many things, a simple strike that could have countless of variations. In another moment, he could feel that this move was akin to nature and harmonized the body with the world before shaping it. In the next moment, he could feel that it contained a terrifying amount of power that could scare demons and shatter the world. With such a simple-looking painting, Jianchen was able to understand so many pieces of information. If the other saint rulers were to figure out that Jianchen was able to grasp this much, their eyes would pop open in shock, and they would look at him with inconceivable looks. For an Earth Saint Master to gain so many insights after looking at a saint-tier battle skill was an impossible task. If Jianchen were to later have a grasp on the profound mysteries of the world, then understanding this saint-tier battle skill was not too far out of his reach. In fact, establishing his own saint-tier battle skill wouldn't be impossible either. As soon as this bit of information had traveled to Jianchen's mind, his mind instantly grew chaotic once more as it swelled up, threatening to fracture at any moment. Jianchen immediately closed his eyes once more and forced himself to calm down. After calming down, Jianchen methodically inspected the paintings over and over again. However, the only information he could gather from them was the fact that these simple paintings seemed to be filled with many mysteries. No matter how much he looked at them, he was unable to progress. Thus he could only stop here. If he tried to push on, he would get a splitting headache, his thoughts would go berserk, and his thought processes would slow down. It seems that being unable to grasp the mysteries of the world causes one to be unable to understand the saint-tier battle skill. I can sense that this move is filled with many things, but I cannot understand the concepts. Could it be that the profound mysteries of the world are not enough? Jianchen thought to himself. With one of the legendary saint-tier battle skills right in front of him, but he himself unable to comprehend the meaning behind it, left Jianchen feeling unwell. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.